down, go and see what's happening, but you will then have a visual presentation of this event. So I'll call on Evelyn, who will be hosting or moderating our welcome remarks, and our ambassadors and the UN coordinator to please come up. Thank you. No problem. Oh, and just to say, it is being recorded. As you can see, our Zoom participants would be online as well. So, yeah. Just let us know if you're not comfortable with your picture being taken or being recorded, and we'll try not to get the camera on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizelle. Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, all formalities hereby fulfilled. It is a great pleasure for Africa Legal Aid to once again engage with the CSVR in a symposium on preventing gender-based violence in Southern Africa. Special thanks to the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for hosting this meeting on these lovely, and as always, for their priceless support. Sincere thanks to the embassies of Switzerland, Ireland, and Ubomi Trust for their invaluable support. Distinguished participants, patriarchy, gender inequality, systemic racism, and other forms of inequities are root causes of gender-based violence. Creating cultures and societies, excuse me, creating cultures and societies that normalize and accept violence against women. Clearly, there is a need to integrate cross-cutting elements in our quest to promote gender equality and eliminate gender-based violence. Last year, at a seminar AFLA convened on the use of artificial intelligence in international criminal courts, we identified gender and racial bias in artificial intelligence as cross-cutting topics. In the program for this meeting, cross-cutting elements such as climate change will be discussed. In addition, we will discuss other innovative approaches to tackle GBV, such as using civil litigation to attain justice for gender-based violence.
Women themselves are a reason for hope. They have played a vital role in shaping the future of democratic Southern Africa, and they've always acted as changers and agents of positive change. In August 1956, for example, 20,000 South African women marched to the Union buildings in protest of apartheid laws. So August serves us as a reminder of the tough, gracious, and above all, courageous women who have fought for their and others' rights. And we continue to celebrate their strength, resilience, and their contribution to society. And apart from all the strong women standing up for their own futures, there's also increased awareness and advocacy, often carried out by community-led initiatives. There's increased international support and partnerships. And with this symposium, we want to contribute to that international collaboration. And of course, SADC countries have already done some important work in creating the necessary legal frameworks against gender-based violence. For instance, in 2018, the SADC strategy and framework of action for addressing gender-based violence was adopted. And in addition, the SADC regional strategy on women, peace and security was created. And these and other frameworks help to guide the member states in efforts to put an end to violence against women and girls. When it comes to the Netherlands, human rights foreign policy, gender equality and women's rights are a central priority. Like many countries in the SADC region, The Netherlands is a strong supporter of a number of multilateral human rights themes, in particular increasing women's leadership and participation in political decision-making, preventing and stopping violence against women and girls, and strengthening women's role in conflict resolution and peace building. Our feminist foreign policy places these issues back, center, and front. We believe that promoting gender equality leads to a nationwide fostering of peace and prosperity, as also adopted by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. So what can we do? What interventions can be part of the solution? Let me just mention 3, and then I'm sure you will be coming up with much more solutions. Firstly, we need to invest in women and girls' financial and economic freedom and quality education. Girls need to be kept in school, as we know that girls who miss out on education are more susceptible to violence, especially in the domestic space. By providing economic and educational freedoms, we ensure that women are able to participate fully in society and are not dependent on their male counterparts for their livelihoods. Secondly, we need to promote and advocate for women's participation in politics. Many new laws continue to exclude women, leaving them vulnerable to the compound interest of ongoing gender disparities. Thirdly, we need to recognize that gender-based violence has a major societal and developmental impacts. Mitigating it requires treating it as a societal problem rather than a woman's issue. We need to engage and educate entire communities, including men and boys, traditional and religious leaders. Because we know that in communities where everyone is educated about gender-based violence, we've seen very positive results. It really improves the position of women. And fourth and lastly, let us stand up for each other. To the women, I'd like to say, let's support each other. And to the men, please support the women around you and raise your voice against injustices. I think we all have a role to play, a part to play in making the world a safer place for women and girls. And that takes me back to the conference of today. The reason that we are gathered here today is for us to come up with key practical recommendations that will help us to address gender-based violence in the SADC region. There will be a report, and this report will be shared with all the participants, so with all of you, once it has been finalized. Nothing less than people united in this purpose can overcome the gross injustices of gender-based violence, discrimination, and gender inequality. It's my sincere wish that with this symposium, we speed up that process. Thank you for joining us today and tomorrow. I look very much forward to the discussions and of course to the report with the recommendations. As mentioned, there's hope. Now let's make it work. Thank you very much. Siyabonga. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for reminding us that promoting gender equality and mitigating gender-based violence leads to prosperity. Thank you for that. I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Mirko Manzoni, the Ambassador of Switzerland to South Africa.
Thank you. Dear Ambassador Johanne Doornewaard, Ambassador of Kingdom of Netherlands, dear fellow partners, esteemed guests, good morning. I changed a bit my speech now because I see so many women, and it's not that I don't like, but I have also my experience in this topic, and it touched me personally, and I think that the problem are the men, and you should try to involve more the men in this topic and put them in front of their bad behavior and responsibility. But let's go back to the formal speech. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you this morning at the opening of the Southern Africa Symposium on Preventing Gender-Based Violence, which is coordinated by the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. As ambassador of Switzerland in South Africa, accredited to Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana, Namibia, and Mauritius, I'm proud to be partnered of this regional initiative. Following the high-level consultation with South Africa in 2023, Switzerland embarked in a 3-year partnership with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. The project's main objective is to create pathway preventing gender-based violence through community and multi-stakeholder engagement, and fighting impunity through an increased access to justice. Today's regional symposium is one of the first initiatives that form part of our partnership with the center. As we all know, sexual and gender-based violence constitutes a human right violation. And I'm sorry, but there also, I think most of people, they don't understand, but it's really serious. The damage it inflicts on victims and survivors has an impact on society as a whole. It remains the most widespread human rights violation worldwide. 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence at least once in their life. Switzerland's foreign policy aims to combat all forms of gender-based violence, to strengthen women's economic empowerment and promote sexual and reproductive health as set in our strategy on gender equality and women's rights. Women's rights are a priority for Swiss foreign policy at both bilateral and multilateral level. Switzerland's next foreign policy strategy 2024-27 explicitly mentions women's rights in its priority in the field of human rights diplomacy. As an elected member of the Security Council, Switzerland is committed to work towards implementation of the requirements the Council set itself in the Resolution 1820, which recognizes sexual violence as a weapon and tactic of war. Despite the fact that the right of equality between men and women is fundamental, even in my country, Switzerland, violence against women and domestic violence are unfortunately common. I'm the husband of a victim of gender-based violence, and I was just informed after 20 years of marriage, and I asked why, and the answer was because I would have been judged. A 2023 study by World Population Review identified Botswana, Lesotho, and South Africa as the top 3 countries with the highest rape rate in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, gender-based violence requires our urgent attention and collective coordinated action to address. This is exactly why this symposium is necessary. By reflecting on your life experience in your diverse country, sharing lessons learned and good practices from the Southern Africa region, which can no doubt pave the way forward and contribute to creating openings and avenues. You give us a reason for hope in line with the theme of this symposium. I wish you well in your deliberation and look forward to the outcome of this regional symposium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mazzoni, for highlighting the promotion of women's economic empowerment by Switzerland and reproductive rights. And also thank you for sharing a personal story, thereby demystifying speaking openly about gender-based violence. Last year when we had the pilot symposium, if you will, I had dinner with a friend and her partner, and then the following day we had another dinner. And then when her partner felt comfortable with me, he told me that he had lost his daughter to gender-based violence and his ex-son-in-law was just coming out of prison. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Nelson Mufu, the United Nations resident. Oh, sorry, apologies. His Excellency Austin Gormley, Ambassador of Ireland to South Africa. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Sani Bonani, Dumalang, Goeiemorgen. Good morning. And Ministers, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd just like to pay tribute to our Swiss colleague, actually, for that very powerful personal testimony. That takes courage. So thank you for that. And thank you to our Dutch colleague for hosting us in this beautiful residence and garden. This is a very special occasion, obviously, and a very special welcome to all of the stakeholders from near or far across SADC have taken the time to travel and to be here today. Your presence is really appreciated. For an Irish ambassador, actually, I'm going to be unusual in that I will be succinct. But part of the duty is again to express thanks to our invaluable partners, the Centre for Study of Violence and Reconciliation, Africa Legal Aid, who's spoken, UNESCO, and the UN Resident Coordinator is here, Obumi Trust. And again, it's always an honor and pleasure to coordinate and to collaborate with what we call like-minded countries like the Netherlands and Switzerland. Together, I think our collective efforts have ensured that this important platform to address a critical regional and global challenge came to fruition. Gender-based violence resonates deeply with us in Ireland. The position of women in Irish society hasn't always been what it should be and what it is today. We've been long committed, though, to addressing violence against women and girls, recognizing it as a grave violation of human rights and tackling it is of paramount importance. Our Minister for Justice, Helen McAtee, said recently that gender-based violence is affecting every aspect of Irish society. She also said that crimes, and these are crimes, will not be tolerated irrespective of who you are or where you work. And this followed a high-profile case involving very serious assault by a member of our serving Defence Forces on an Irish citizen. And these people, of course, our Defence Forces and our police are employed to protect our people. So we do have a national strategy on sexual and gender-based violence. This runs to 2026. It's based on the Istanbul Convention, the 4 pillars: prevention, protection, prosecution, and policy coordination. And of course, our national strategy is echoed in our foreign policy, which also has a fundamental pillar relating to the empowerment of women and also the promotion of women, peace, and security. The title of our national strategy is Zero Tolerance. We understand at the same time that the causes of gender-based violence are complex and require a coordinated approach. Prevention is a vital component of this effort. And given the statistics as well that my Dutch colleague has outlined, it's clear that this is a priority in this part of the world and South Africa in particular. That's why Ireland is proud to support the development of South Africa's national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide. We'll continue to support the implementation of that plan through partnerships with both government and civil society, and our collaborations on initiatives such as this one underscores our commitment as Ireland to tackling this common challenge together. As we gather for this symposium under the theme Reason for Hope, I would like to suggest, with deep respect for your work on the front lines, that you here today embody that hope. Your continued efforts to tackle this challenge and your presence here are a testament to the joint commitment that we all share. And over the next 2 days, I'd encourage you all to obviously exchange your perspectives, valuable lessons from across the region. It's important that there's a regional dimension of this for the first time. Let's strategize as well on how to enhance and strengthen our regional and sub-regional networks, our partnerships to accelerate our collective response to the scourge of gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gomley, for letting us know that no society, no country is immune from gender-based violence, not even Ireland, and also for highlighting the steps, the efforts that are being taken in Ireland to mitigate gender-based violence, which I hope we will be able to learn from. I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Nelson Mufa, United Nations Resident Coordinator for South Africa.
Thank you very much to the program director and of course all the partners who helped collaborate to make sure this has come together. But let me stand on an existing protocol. But before I proceed, I want to really graciously also thank our host, the ambassador of the Netherlands, for bringing us together, as well as the other excellencies who are in the room and the partners as well. We gather during Women's Month, and I think it's important that we take a moment to also consider the importance really of celebrating the contribution of women, not only to South Africa, but also to the world and humanity. And I think it's really important that we appreciate the fact that as one of my bosses, who happens to also be a victim actually of gender-based violence, always says, you cannot fly a plane with just one of the wings. You need both wings. And so you certainly need both men and women working together to be able to change the world and also to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Ngenifisela ilanga ilele labantu besimame. I hope that's a correct translation for Happy Women's Month. I was inspired by what Austin did there to try to get a Zulu, I think, translation for that. But we come together really to renew our commitment to combating GBV and to accelerate achievement of the SDGs. And it is essential that we recognize why this is important and requires collaboration and urgent action. You would see that the UN family is collectively working on this issue and coming together, and several of the UN colleagues are also in the room, and to partner and work with colleagues, and particularly also the South African stakeholders working on this issue, and also government officials to be able to make an impact. This is because this violence is not only about a personal tragedy, it is also a societal pandemic, as it has been described numerous times. It impedes the development of stable, safe, and inclusive communities, and also makes it difficult to achieve the collective aspirations that we have for ourselves. And in response to what is being considered and has already been described this morning as severe and entrenched challenges faced in our sub-region, and looking at the 2023 World Population Review report that was released, the sub-region, especially Botswana, Lesotho, and South Africa, are noted as having the highest rape rates globally. And so this is something that has also led us to think about how do we build on existing interventions and scale up interventions to really make a dent in this vexed issue. And so last year, UN entities in the sub-region, led by the resident coordinators, came together here in Pretoria to launch a regional gender-based violence initiative. And this ambitious program, which we're proposing and currently building partnerships around, encompasses a joint effort of countries from South Africa, of course, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, and Zambia, and in an effort to solidify our collective response and urgently act towards ending violence against women and girls. Much more needs to be done through our individual efforts, but certainly by aligning our interventions and forging ahead collectively. Through this approach, we will ensure a more comprehensive and whole of society and multi-sectoral approach that unites the development community as well as the activists on the ground. Therefore, we must support and engage better with dedicated joint programs that will help us have bigger impact. One of such joint initiatives, which I would like to highlight, is the Global Spotlight Initiative, which was and is the world's largest targeted effort to invest in gender equality as a precondition and driver for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Building on the initiative, the achievements of the first phase of the Spotlight Initiative, which I really must pause and also acknowledge that with seed funding from the European Union, this was what made us to be able to kickstart this intervention. We must then proceed by building partnerships, like I said, enhance coordination, and eliminate silos by identifying synergies in all efforts, thereby avoiding duplication. Collective interventions, as we've learned from the first phase of the Spotlight Initiative, are now looking at the second phase of this, going forward with a broadened partnerships base beyond the EU, but including the EU. We look at working on laws, policies, and institutions, prevention and empowerment through promoting gender equitable social norms, attitudes, behaviors, and opportunities, because women's empowerment and financial empowerment will really help us to be able to make progress in this regard. Alongside all these interventions is also reinforcing the response through essential services, and finally supporting local civil society and women's movements to be able to also have agency. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our goal is to leverage national and regional strengths and economies of scale, foster cross-country learning, and expand successful flagship programs in GBV prevention. Following the introduction of this regional program, the UN in South Africa has supported and worked with a number of the partners in the room to spearhead critical interventions which are geared towards the elimination of GBV. One of such interventions has been in supporting the implementation of the comprehensive national GBV and femicide prevention strategy, and also the national strategic plan, as well as recently the signing of the bill that establishes the council on GBV through the presidential initiative. Through efforts like the 100-day challenge capacity building program and partnerships with law enforcement and community leaders, we have made strides in ensuring that GBV victims can access justice and support. And I look forward actually in the coming weeks to visit such programs in the Western Cape, where we're also active through one of our partners on the ground. These interventions have bolstered community and institutional responses, improved processes, and ensured efficient resource allocation. But I keep on coming back to the phrase, more needs to be done through collective action. It is essential that we work together also to champion positive masculinity. And I think the previous speakers emphasized the importance of bringing men into this conversation, because men are the perpetrators by and large. And by doing this, we can promote healthy and constructive behaviors, attitudes, and values that reinforce our commitment to reversing power relations that perpetuate violence for future generations. This is not just a responsibility, it is actually a moral obligation that we have to take on. And the men in the room should join the effort also, I think, initiated by the president to sign the pledge on positive masculinity. Certainly that's something that I will be doing, and I call on all the others to do the same. Through the He for She initiative spearheaded by the UN, we have also been able to foster the engagement of men and also the responsible treatment of women, not only in communities, but also in the business sector. There's the notion also of male allyship that aligns with these principles. So it is important that such community-based models continue to be leveraged because they lead to tangible results, and that we include different segments of society to be able to make a difference. In South Africa, one of the things we're also trying to do is to work with traditional and Khoisan leaders to be able to also take forward community interventions that they, as gatekeepers and of cultural norms, but also of communities, can help us address. The Interfaith Statement of Commitment to End GBV, endorsed by leaders from 8 diverse faiths, further exemplifies the united stance against GBV. And such initiatives also need to be taken to scale beyond South Africa into the other countries. In addition to addressing the GBV challenge, the UN remains committed to supporting South Africa's efforts to eliminate the loss of lives associated with male circumcision, particularly through the creation of customized awareness materials. And again, in the Eastern Cape, this is an intervention that we, working with several partners, are trying to take forward, not only to prevent loss of lives, but also to use this customary process to inculcate positive values into men as they, or boys as they transition into malehood. And beyond these efforts in South Africa, it is important that we continue to build human capabilities that focus on saving lives. And one of the ways of doing this also, of course, is through early childhood education. And as accessing education is important, and particularly for kids who really need to get the values inculcated into them at an early stage. And we're currently talking to different partners about expanding a program in this regard. So the task before us is certainly immense, but it is not insurmountable, because the commitment in this room, and by coming together, we will ensure we make a difference. And in a month's time in New York, there is the Summit of the Future on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly, which really has at its core an effort to reinforce multilateral cooperation to deal with the challenges that we're facing as humanity. And to be able to address these, we need the voices, the concerns, and the aid of women and girls at the center of our collective. And really by saying two things and figuring out what interventions we need to try to reinforce, collaborate around, we really need to scale up resources. We really need to make a difference, because this is a matter, an issue, a concern that is not going away despite the enabling environment politically and legislatively in South Africa and in the sub-region to be able to address this. So I'm looking forward really to hosting on the 10th of September as well, a roundtable discussion with the development partners at leadership level to see how we can reinforce our actions collectively on the one hand. And on the other hand, really to ensure that we collectively also engage beyond the development partners into the private sector, but accompanying the national and sub-regional strategies that are put in place to be able to target this, working with and building on the activism from groups in communities that are leading this work. Let me therefore end by quoting what the Secretary General, my boss, says on this matter. Together, let us stand up and speak out. Let's build a world that will not tolerate violence against women in any form, anywhere, once and for all. Please let us heed this call to action and ensure better lives for women through concerted efforts to prevent and eliminate gender-based violence and femicide in our societies. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Nelson Mufa, for that expose, and also for reminding us of the urgent need to align our collective efforts and adopt a holistic approach to addressing gender-based violence. Thank you also very much for your collaboration. Later today, we have a whole session dedicated to the UN's collective response to gender-based violence. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to my friend, our partner, Anna Moyo, the Executive Director of the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, to introduce the theme of the symposium. Anna.
Good morning, everyone. I promise you I'm not young. And my voice, as small as it is, I promise it will be audible. But really, I stand also on all protocols already observed, and really also continue to express our sincerest gratitude to the Ambassador of Denmark for hosting us for this event, the Ambassador of Switzerland, the Ambassador of Ireland, the United Nations, as well as UNESCO and AFLA, our partners in hosting this event. It would not have been possible without all the support that we have garnered and received from you. My task is really a simple one, to basically present the theme of the symposium. We are still focusing on gender-based violence prevention in Southern Africa. I think the ambassador spoke earlier about the fact that in the World Population Review report of 2023, 3 countries that topped the list, the top 10 list of the highest, of countries with the highest rape cases globally are in Southern Africa. This is a cause for concern, and it was upon those findings that we actually started this symposium in the first place, where we said there is a problem here. We therefore need to bring everyone together and look at the problem and look at how we can strengthen our interventions towards preventing gender-based violence. I'll speak a little bit about why prevention, when we could have chosen perhaps other strategies, be it legal frameworks, response to gender-based violence that is already pervasive in many of our societies. I think for us, the focus on prevention was with the view that a lot of our legal frameworks and normative frameworks in many of our countries, even in Southern Africa, focus a lot on response, what to do when gender-based violence has occurred. We talk a lot in our legislative frameworks, in our acts, our legislation, about what to do with the perpetrator, taking the perpetrator out of society, removing them from communities through incarceration, for instance. We talk a lot about the processes and the procedures, but the work of prevention often remains undone. It is the heavy lifting work of prevention that will really see us adopt a proactive approach to addressing gender-based violence and even reducing gender-based violence in our communities and in our societies. It is the necessary work that calls for all hands on deck to address this scourge of gender-based violence. I think we have heard from the ambassadors and also from United Nations that the need for men being part of the people around the table is important, and the work of prevention anchors the role of men and discussions with men, particularly to better understand why or what drives them perhaps to commit or to perpetrate gender-based violence. And in some of the discussions in the work that we have done as the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation in communities where we have engaged with men in community dialogues, they've been forthcoming in highlighting some of the key drivers or some of the reasons or factors that drive them to perpetrate gender-based violence, from historical to some of the most recent, as well as prevailing conditions, for instance, have been highlighted. I think just to highlight one factor that men have highlighted, some have highlighted the fact that they've grown up in environments or in homes where gender-based violence was normalized, and it was common occurrence to see their father beat their mothers, for instance. And within that scenario, in as much as they hated what their fathers were doing, and they had vowed in their hearts to say, I will never treat my wife this way, they have found themselves doing exactly the same to the women in their lives, committing gender-based violence or beating their wives, for instance. In the first symposium, I spoke a little bit about the fact that we have learned through research and engaging with communities that gender-based violence is not a type of violence that happens in a vacuum or in isolation. In most instances, it's also anchored in other forms of violence, for instance, or sometimes it's actually catalyzed by other forms of violence. So when we want to address gender-based violence, we need to also sometimes locate it within the much larger architecture of violence in society, which normalizes gender-based violence and other forms of violence. So this calls us to address these other forms of violence as root causes or key drivers or triggers of gender-based violence. This is the preventative or the prevention approach, which really calls for a much wider spectrum of looking at issues more holistically and addressing gender-based violence, not from a one-sided approach, but from a multi-pronged approach. I also spoke in the symposium last year about the fact that in most of our countries, particularly South Africa, violence has become a language for expressing our frustrations, our anger, but also a language of asserting our dominance and power over others. With gender-based violence, it's usually power and dominance over women, be it older women, younger women, or even girls. And if violence is a language, it means then that it is learned. As we all know, language is learned. If it can be learned, then it can also be unlearned. And the work of prevention calls for this transformative approach to addressing gender-based violence, where we advance strategies and initiatives that facilitate unlearning of toxic masculinities, the beliefs that perpetuate gender-based violence, as well as some of the attitudes that are pervasive in society and in communities and in homes that lead to gender-based violence. With this unlearning comes the learning of new approaches and new ways of relating with women and seeing women, treating women, and giving women the dignity and the respect that they deserve from a human rights perspective, but also from a gender perspective. Some of the objectives of this platform for us is ensuring that we galvanize collective action from multiple stakeholders here in the room to effectively address gender-based violence. We stand to learn from one another. We stand to also learn from some of the best practices, the case studies that will be presented in the room over the next 2 days, so that where there are still gaps in some of our jurisdictions and contextual, in our context, we can then replicate some of the best practices. We know some of our countries in Southern Africa are ahead of the curve in addressing gender-based violence from a preventative as well as from a response perspective. And we stand to gain a lot through the sharing that we will have over the next 2 days, the learning and the sharing that can only make better some of our strategies on the ground. But we also want to reflect on what's working and what's not working in our country-specific or community-based or institution-focused strategies to prevent and address gender-based violence. After these reflections, we want to then collectively craft perhaps better strategies that will meaningfully and effectively address gender-based violence, not only in our individual countries, but also in Southern Africa as a whole. On this note, I really invite all of us to engage robustly with some of the themes, the panels that we have put in place for this program, and share some of our best practices, some of our strategies that can either be replicated or be used to improve some of our gender-based violence strategies and initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for always emphasizing prevention, 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 without which we end up with femicide. And we can't bring people back once they're dead. So I would now like to give the floor to our keynote speaker, Jane Imfolo. She's the CEO of Jane Imfolo Limited. She will speak on art as a tool to prevent GBV.
just a dream. None of it is real. Shh. One night, my husband James came back home drunk, and he demanded that I make food for him, and I told him that he's old enough and he should do it himself, and he lost it. He then went on and grabbed our then 2-year-old daughter by the neck. James, please, James, please stop it. Do not hurt the baby. I hope you don't become like your mother. Women must know their place. James, please stop it. You're hurting our baby. James! I cried out as he dropped my baby to the floor. I looked down and I realized what I have done. Mommy, you're hurting him. Mommy, stop it. I looked down and I realized that I am grabbing the young man by his neck. The one who has been unkind to me. I am grabbing his neck and I'm drowning him in one of the toilets. It's too late. The young man is gone, drowned in his sorrow and drowned in his blood. But where does this knife come from? Shh. None of it is real. It's just a dream. When others bring swords to a fight, I bring only myself and the only powerful tool that I know, and that is art. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jane Mpolo, and what you just experienced is pure creativity. And that is the tool that I use to provoke discussions, to raise awareness, and to aid to healing, as well as coming up with solutions. So theater is my main theme of expression, is my primary thing that I do to tackle gender-based violence. So, like I said, Kalibitso ke Jane Mpolo. I am based in Bloemfontein. Ke ngwana wa Botshabelo, Marweleng from the township. And interesting facts about me. I can't think of many at the moment because I mean we are talking about gender-based violence, so I'll just go ahead and depress you a little bit. I have unfortunately been part of the statistics of the millions of women and probably hundreds of thousands of men who have been victims of gender-based violence. I was raped at the age of 13. I already had a boyfriend. Yes, parents, do talk to your children. It wasn't long after I had gone on my periods and my mom started telling me that I should run away from boys. So naturally I became rebellious and I went towards them, and I learned a very uncomfortable lesson. I lost both my parents to HIV-related diseases when I was in matric and 17 years of age. I was busy preparing for the most important exams of my life. And as we buried my father, 2 days later, my mom passed on. I guess she really loved him that much. And I was then left with my sister and my brothers. Now, I want to talk about my one brother who did not come out the same person after we lost our parents. As we often know, men are not given the opportunity or the space to be themselves, to reflect on their emotions, to talk about things. And what did he do? He ended up being an alcoholic. He got some chronic diseases that he really struggled with for many, many years. And eventually the problem of alcoholism got in the way of him taking his meds, and he's also passed on. And as if that wasn't enough, when I was 25, so my brother just recently passed on like 2 years ago. When I was 25 years old, I lost my secondary parents, who are my sister and her husband. So they had a very interesting, uncomfortable relationship where they would really beat each other up. And my sister would always say, "Oh, don't worry, I've got this. I will beat the hell out of him." So as you can see or hear by now, I have been surrounded by gender-based violence all my life. I remember even when I was younger, there was a time when my father beat my mother up so much with a whip. I only saw it that were left as a young girl. I definitely was the thing did to the kids. I have no idea. Never ever once after that saw him. They got married. They had a son. It was in relationships with girls that were way younger than me, and that time my sister's like 8 years older than me. So it was really, really horrible. They would fight. They would beat each other up, and he would constantly say that if I am to lose you to somebody else, especially, I'm going to kill all of you being myself, their son, my sister. And nobody believed him, but I did. I did, because I was already doing theater. I was doing my research. I was doing shows like that are dealing with gender-based violence. And I knew that if a man or anybody for that matter says they're going to kill you, you need to believe them. They use the excuse that, "Oh no, he's just drunk." And I'm like, drunk people are the most honest. And unfortunately, back in 2014, my sister had already moved back home and decided that she didn't want to make this work. She actually wanted to move earlier, but the family kept on saying, "Oh no, you should try and make it work. It's going to be such a shame if you come back home." And I told her that, you know what, you might not make it back home, but please make sure that your child is fine. And I remember this particular day, I said to her, "I hope you have taken care of your finances, because I will take care of your child, but I cannot deal with the financial burden." And that day she told me where her policies were and everything. Little did I know that it was only months until I'm gonna lose her. What the husband did was he drove off with her. They were trying to reconcile, I believe, because 2 weeks before that they were lovey-dovey. I hated him at this point, wanted nothing to do with him. And so he poured petrol in the car with both of them in it, set it on fire. He died on the scene. My sister lived to tell the tale, and we lost her a couple of hours later. I mean, even if my sister didn't leave, I would have known, because he has told us so many, many times. And do you know what the family did? They started defending him, saying that it's my sister's fault, that their child never did things like that. And I remember, because I'm in the artistic space, naturally the first thing was we need to create awareness. There's not enough noise being made about this. I called on to my newspaper friends, and I was told that you must never hang your dirty laundry out for anybody to see. And I'm grateful for that moment, because I became rebellious. By now, you know, if you tell me don't do something, I will definitely do it. So I remember, even in terms of me getting raped, I didn't know what happened to me. I suddenly became promiscuous. I was like from one man to the next, trying to find myself in the same person who has taken myself away from me. I did not understand what was happening. And then 14 years later, I was busy rehearsing a show. It was actually the first script that I co-wrote, and it was called Adjusted. And I was playing a character that was lesbian and correctively raped. And that very moment, it was like maybe a month into rehearsals, I was like, wait, I'm a victim of rape. And naturally, my friends were laughing. "Ah, when are you like joking around?" I'm like, no, I am not joking. This thing actually happened to me. Yes, it wasn't multiple men, it was one, but I have been raped for the first time. Because of theater, I could put a word to what happened to me, and I regained my power back. I started going towards the therapy, using theater as a therapy, using theater as a tool for healing. And I'm here today feeling like I am such a strong, beautiful, powerful Black woman. I went from being broken to being built. And if I wasn't introduced to theater, I probably wouldn't be here today. I'm a mother of twins, and they are my world, a boy and a girl. And yeah, so I'm just going to push even harder. If you have money just to give me because I'm fabulous, you are very much welcome. So yeah, I specialize in theater, site-specific art, as well as film making. So those are some of my accolades, which are not necessarily important because, I mean, by me just standing here, you already know what it is. I'm very much passionate about inclusive education, social justice, and trading skills. So today, I'm just going to focus on gender-based violence and how I am going about giving voices to the voiceless, provoking discussions, creating awareness, and also aiding to the prevention thereof. So we cannot fix what able to fix it. And remember, there was a time when we were performing, and the point when I said, sometimes I'm condoning what he did, but I looked back and I remember the environment that we grew up in. I remember telling my friends that I actually had another boyfriend prior to that, guys. I was busy. And he was treating me like a queen. And I would talk about him, and my friends would be like, he doesn't love you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I feel so warm. It's so great. It's beautiful. He respects me. They said he doesn't love you. Our boyfriends, they beat us up. They sleep with us. You have to get yourself one of those. And I did. I did, and he took away from me something that was so precious to me. And once he did that, he actually said to me, "Ah, sis, I thought you were a virgin." And that hurt more than anything because I was a virgin. And he didn't understand what impact he would have in my life. I once ran into him, and many years later, and I confronted him, and he said to me, "Don't make noise. You're going to embarrass me." I'm like, embarrass you? You took away so many years of my life and you don't even know that. And I am embarrassing you. Do you understand the guilt and the shame that I had throughout my life, making excuses for you, and I am embarrassing you? How dare you? He passed on. I wasn't bothered. So there's this thing of gender roles where he felt like it was my duty to give to him what's rightfully mine without even questioning it because I'm a woman. A lot of women are victims of gender-based violence because of the dependence of it. It stems from generations of our families where our mothers are supposed to be at home, take care of their dad. If the dad is unhappy, they're going to beat her up, just like James did to the wife, and nobody's supposed to talk about that. The environment that these kids are growing up in, where we are told that it's okay to not be okay. You know, as Mosadi, we say in Sesotho, Mosadi ulela moteo. Like, do not cry out loud for the world to see. Your job is to go there by your pillow, hey? Let it get wet. Take all your frustrations there, but do not ever speak out. Unfortunately, a lot of our young boys and girls are growing up in circumstances like that, and they are imitating the behavior of the adults. There's also this thing of lack of knowledge where they don't even know what they're doing is wrong. Some perpetrators are not even aware that what they are doing is perpetrating because there's no open communication between the parties, be it the adult and the child, the teacher and the learners, there's no open communication. I remember at one point, my mother got me to feel so comfortable. She was asking me about my boyfriend, and I went on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love him so much. And she eventually said to me, I am not your friend, stop it. And from that moment on, I realized that I couldn't talk to her about things that even bother me. I was raped, and all of my family members, okay, I still have 2 brothers now, they passed on and they didn't even know what happened to me. I only found my voice later through theater, through writing, through journaling. And only then was I brave enough. And I didn't also want to talk about it because I felt like, firstly, people are going to judge me. You were 13 years old. What were you doing with him in that shack? What were you why were you even thinking about boys? Gosh, were you not supposed to be at school? And that's exactly what happened. But thankfully, I had the greatest support, and I spoke about this while I was ready to take back my voice. So I did not care for people who have their own insecurities. And let's be honest, there are lack of support. There's lack of support and tools, and we often forget about the boy child. When we speak about men, is men are trash, men are dogs. Hey, the hashtags, you know them, ladies, ne? You know them, but we are forgetting that we are raising boy children. So what are we telling them? So it's very important that we do equip our girls with the skills. Like, for example, what I'm doing is I would have even the mentorship sessions or skills trading or arts coaching sessions where the girl child can later use art as a form of whether they do it part-time or in their free time, but they can maybe sell their writings, their poetry or whatever. That's some sort of what's this money coming in. She has some sort of dependence. But while we are busy empowering the girl child, we are not preparing the boy child for the empowered girl child. And that's where the problem is. That's where the problem is. That's why people do not like activists, because we are too loud. We are complaining all the time. But the thing is, we are busy moving and the boy child is being left behind. So one of the things that I do mostly is we would visit schools and we would tackle gender-based violence and whatever else issues that they have there. If maybe there's a drug addiction problem, we also, implement that. We tailor-made the scripts. And I remember there was a school tour that we did. And out of all the schools we went to, in every school, actually, there was a boy child complaining that I am tired of you attacking me. Every time when I watch the TV, the movies, your theater show, I hated it so much because what are you saying about me? And instead of saying, oh, well, I wouldn't say these things if you didn't do them, I was like, wait, how do we then address this? And I went back and I did a very simple change where even though we're speaking about gender-based violence and rape and all these uncomfortable things, I ended up going for a male character. The actor was a man, and you have no idea how many boy children started speaking out, because for the first time they could see themselves being represented. They could see their pain, they could see their sorrows, they could see all of these things, and they eventually spoke out. It was such a beautiful thing. So sometimes it's just a small change that you can definitely make. So what I do is interactive theater shows. I'll just focus on theater for today, ensuring that the audiences are part of the dialogue. You are already part of this dialogue by your yes, you're already that. But then obviously when you go to schools and maybe it's like smaller children, then you'll have those moments of asking them questions in between, and then you continue to act. Or maybe just saying something like, if a man loves you, he will beat you, right? The woke ones will say, oh, hell no. Those ones who are unsure will be like, and then those ones who think it's right will be like, yes, yes. And some will go into it. Yes, yes. My daddy actually does that to my mom. Da, 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 da. So while we are busy doing that, we also have a team of people who are actually looking at the children. How are they responding? Is there a child that needs intervention? Because some of them, we go there and we put salt into their wounds and they need intervention immediately. We have like, okay, now I'm too forward. So anyway, the focus areas would be us being the mirror and creating the awareness. The spotlight is here, ladies. Thank you. So we would make sure that these kids are seeing themselves in the theater shows that we are doing. We are creating that awareness that they're not even aware of. The people who were in the bus this morning, when it went up the hill and then, went back and then Tate was struggling a bit. Did you realize what happened? Suddenly, all of us became drivers. Suddenly, we knew what to do to fix the problem. But if any of us were in the same situation, we would have made the same mistakes. So I love making sure that people are seeing themselves from objective eyes. So I will be that character. I will be you, the struggles. I will embody all of that. And you look at me from an objective eye, because then from then onwards, you will be more solution driven than just concentrating on the problems. And of course, we held the workshops where we are trading skills with these kids. We create a safe space and we come up with solutions. We also work hand in hand with social workers. So we are preventing it by tackling it from a very young age. And obviously, when you're speaking to kids, the younger ones, you probably wouldn't make it as graphic as I did. You can just maybe talk about the stars exploding and then suddenly they see their parents in that. Am I over time? But anyway, yes, I actually touched on everything. Okay, can I just work on the slide? Ne? In 2019, we visited 20 schools, for example, and we touched about 4,000 learners, of which 10% of them were victims of rape and gender-based violence. 90% of them were speaking out for the first time, so that's the impact of theater. And about 70%, it demanded the intervention that didn't involve the school, so they also do not feel safe at schools. We can really definitely, I was done actually, share this, but though that's me, my website, my email address, I forgot to add my banking details, and thank you so much for this. Thank you, excuse me.
Thank you very much, Jane Imfolo. I could listen to you all day, as I am sure will the other participants be happy to listen to you all day. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time. This is a story of a survivor. A survivor is an empowered victim. In this case, an empowered victim turned advocate against GBV. When I was listening to Jane, I kept wondering, before she told us, I was wondering, well, how come she survived when others in her immediate family didn't? She told us it's art. So we all need a bit of art. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thanks. So we'll have the grounding exercise and then start the next session. Who's doing the grounding exercise?
Hi.
You, great.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I have one already. Yes, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings to the ambassadors of the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Ireland, esteemed guests. My name is Amina Mwaikambo. I'm at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. I work in mental health and psychosocial support. I'm a counseling psychologist by profession. And we've had a lot of conversations and discussions already today about GBV and the understanding that it is a human problem. It's a violence problem. And many of us are either victims or survivors, or we know somebody who's a victim or a survivor of gender-based violence. And many of us have seen it being enacted in our communities. Some of us are working in organizations that are working to eradicate gender-based violence. And because of that, in our different sectors and environments and organizations, we are exposed to a certain level of violence. And because we are human beings and we do not want to walk around and be desensitized to how violence impacts on us, we have to always have this awareness of ourselves as beings who are also being exposed to violence. Many times we think about the physical injuries, and not often we're thinking about the psychological injuries. We sit with a lot of the vicarious trauma in our organizations and the people who work there, and we don't always have a recognition of how is this actually impacting on my life? You know, where's the trauma sitting? The case that I was exposed to today, what does that mean? When we hear about the statistics, what are the statistics going to tell us? Because they're not numbers, they're people. You know, we observed a moment of silence, and I think everybody in this room, as you're observing that moment of silence, was not just sitting in the silence, you were also sitting in your body. You know, you're also feeling what is actually happening as I'm honoring a person who I may or may not know, who has been a victim of gender-based violence, what is actually happening. So it's very important for us to be very intentional about our mental health and well-being, as well as people who are committed to eradicating gender-based violence. Before I introduce us to the exercise that I'd like us to be able to do, something that we can do with ourselves and something we can do to help other people when we are exposed to people who have been traumatized, I just want to read a very quick caption from a book by Bessel van der Kolk, and the book is called The Body Keeps Score. I would encourage everybody to get a copy of that book. It's very important to understand how the trauma that we hear about and we're exposed to actually can start to sit in our bodies. And it reads, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing, interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs, and in an attempt to control these processes, they often become experts at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing the awareness of what is playing out inside. They learn to hide from themselves. And many of us, because we are here, we are in this space, we are committed to walking towards the violence. We're not trying to ignore it. We're walking towards it. We're saying that this is not okay. We're committing ourselves to it. So many of us who are in this room, to a certain extent, at some point, you have to know what is your body actually saying to you. We start to understand it when we think about trauma and how trauma shows up in the different areas of our lives. You know, somebody who has been traumatized, we don't always see it because the psychological scars we don't always see, right? We start to see it in how they become frustrated easily, how they isolate. Jane spoke about how, you know, because of the sexual violation, she also then started to behave in a particular way. That is understood scientifically. It is understood. The people who do become victims of sexual violence sometimes try to reclaim that ownership of their bodies. So there are so many things we don't understand, and we see it in behavior. So we see how we change, or we don't see how we change. We see how our family members change, or we don't see. But we then start to say that, oh, this person is like this, or they're a little bit more irritable. You know, there are certain places that you get very frustrated or triggered in when you're there, right? So I'd like us to please participate in a relaxation exercise. And this exercise is just something to invite you into your body. We're going to have a lot of conversations about gender-based violence. And I know that we're coming from different places and there's many experts here. But as experts, we should never forget about ourselves. We can't leave ourselves behind. Because unfortunately, when we sit and we hear and we understand about the trauma and we continue and we don't recognize what we're sitting with, there are different ways in which we can also start to become violent to other people. So I'd like us to just try out this exercise. It's something that you can do in your own space, but I would like to invite everybody to participate in this today. If you are comfortable, to please just close your eyes. I trust that it is a safe space. No one is going to take your phone or anything like that. I think we're safe. I saw some officials of the law, so I think we're safe. So I just like to invite you to please just close your eyes and lean back in your chair. And just take a deep breath in and exhale. And as you're relaxing, you just notice your feet on the ground and your thighs on your chair and your back resting against the chair. And with your eyes closed, I'd like you to just start by focusing on your hands and make a fist. and hold that fist as tightly as possible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and release. Let go of the fist, relax your hands, and feel the tension release. And again, make a fist, pull it very tight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and release again. And just notice how your hands are feeling when your fingers are not pressed against your palm. And then move your focus to your arms. And just notice what you're feeling in your forearms. And as your forearms, you move up to your shoulders. And I'd like you to just take your shoulders and lift your shoulders up as high as possible. And hold it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And drop your shoulders. And feel those muscles contract and release. And put your shoulders up again. And tense as much as possible. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And drop your shoulders again. And notice how your breathing changes when your shoulders are tense. And take a deep breath in. And exhale. And then take your focus to your face and increase the tension in your forehead. So lift up your eyebrows with your eyes closed and notice the tension and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. And notice the difference in the upper part of your head. And let's move down to your jaw and clench your jaw as tightly as possible. And hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release your jaw. Let your jaw relax. And feel the difference. And let's move down to your neck. And bend your neck forward so it touches your chest. Your chin touches your chest. And turn your head slowly to the left in a circle. And bring it back to the center. Then bend your head back. And then bring it back to the center. And turn your neck to the right. And feel the tension there. And bring it back to the center. And notice the release. Let's go back to the shoulders. And push your shoulders back as far as possible without hurting yourself. And feel that tension and feel the resistance of the chair on your back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. And feel your back again sitting on the chair and just notice the chair and where it's touching your back and how it's holding you up. And let's move to the stomach. And I'd like us to take in a deep breath in and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale. Let's take another deep breath in. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Let's move down to our feet and feel your toes in your shoes and wiggle them a little bit. And I'd like you to take your toes and just curl them up as tightly as possible. And feel the tension in your toes and in your calves and in your legs. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. And let's do it again with the toes. Fold them up as much as possible. Notice how there's tension moving up your legs. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release again. And I'd just like you to take a moment to just scan your entire body. What are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? Where does your body hold tension? Which part of you is uncomfortable from this exercise? And just notice your body as a place that holds so much tension that sometimes you are unaware of until you tense and release. And we're just going to take in a deep breath one more time. Breathe in, hold, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale, push it out as much as you can. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for participating. I hope if you still feel a little bit sleepy, no one will judge you. I hope this exercise is something that has kind of alerted us a little bit more of how much tension our bodies holds. You know, it can be stress and tension due to our work, due to our personal lives, due to things that we've experienced, due to society changing and shifting. But one of the most important things as mental health practitioners we really try to emphasize is that our leaders in our societies, our leaders in our organizations, and our leaders in our communities, our religious groups, our cultural groups should ensure that they're not leaving themselves behind. It's very important for us to be aware of how we are doing as well and taking care of our mental health and well-being. Thank you very much.
The speakers come up for the next session. I think I was asked to tell people to come up. Please. I'm chairing the next session. My name is Murray Hawthorne, and I am an attorney at the Legal Resources Centre and chairman of AFLA, the board. So that's why I'm here. Well, I hope that our 5 speakers are around. Great. So each speaker speaks for 5 to 10 minutes. That's quite strict. And at the end of it, we will have a discussion involving all of us. So I think I will keep it brief. It seems to me that we're going to be learning a lot of lessons in the next session. We're going to be learning lessons from Eswatini, Namibia, and Zimbabwe on strengthening victim-friendly systems, which is very encouraging to know that we'll be learning those lessons. And we'll also be dealing with some complex issues and important issues, critical issues. For example, climate change, conflict and inequality, the intersection between climate change, conflict and inequality. And then the nexus findings on child marriages, teenage pregnancies and school dropouts. So I think that in line with the theme of this conference, we will be hearing and learning from positive things happening in other countries. I think that, just briefly, may I just say, I think that not all, South Africa leads the statistics, but it's not all bad news. I say so just because 20 years ago, I was requested by Lisa Vetten of CSVR to deal with a murder case of a woman who had killed her abusive husband. In that case, she had tried on many occasions to get prevention orders or protection orders from a magistrate under the Domestic Violence Act. The first time she tried, the magistrate did not hear her application and instead said, I want you to come to tea with me. And they went to tea with the magistrate, who said, you are grown-up people, would you please fix your problem? Which of course was not what the law requires of the magistrate. It was quite improper. But I don't think that kind of thing would happen in the courts today. So I think that there has been a maturation of our courts to the point where they wouldn't do a thing, a magistrate would not do such a thing today. So there is progress, I think, in some respects. Because I also did a domestic violence case late in 2022, which went to court in Johannesburg, and I was impressed with the professionalism and the approach and kindliness, actually, of the court in dealing with this problem. So anyway, I'd be grateful to hear from our speakers. The first one being Rosalia Shatilwe, the Deputy Commissioner of Police of Namibia. So welcome, ma'am.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As I was already introduced, I'm Rosalia Nailonga Shatilwe. I'm a Deputy Commissioner in the Namibian Police Force, and I'm heading a division responsible for gender mainstreaming, and I'm as well a focal person for the Namibian Police Force. And I'm really happy to be here with you. Oh, okay, thank you. So, the presentation that I'm going to share with you here is not something new, because when we are talking about gender-based violence, this is a global phenomenon. And I know that, you know, most of the strategies that we have in place are similar to each other. So, but nevertheless, I will just present to you as to what we feel that is very important for us to share with you in terms of the best practices that we are administering back home in Namibia. So Namibia has made a notable stride in addressing gender-based violence. What's going on now? Okay. So maybe just to start with, one of the intervention or the best practices that I would like to share with you today is that we have come up with a strategy of making sure that, you know, the victim of abuse or the survivor of abuse, their rights are being adhered to, in order for them to feel that, you know, they are not being left out, or they have been abused without anyone to really, you know, understand what they are going through. As a result, the Namibian government had a sleepless night, and they came up with a very innovative idea to establish the specialized unit, which is under the mandate of the Namibian Police Force. But the good part of it, the strategy that we are using in Namibia, those specialized units are being, the way how we establish them, they are operating in a multi-sectoral approach, meaning that we bring other stakeholders on board. So we don't just operate in a vacuum. So, and as a result, this have really enhanced, or it really make it very possible, so that the victims are not really feeling that, you know, they are being left out. And maybe just because of time, I will just also mention that, you know, the stakeholders that I'm referring here range from the law enforcement agencies, the justice system, the public themselves, because we also engage public, the the legal assistance, counseling, social workers, medical care. You know, everyone is involved in when it comes to the issue of gender-based violence. And that's why I mentioned earlier that, you know, we do, the unit operate in a multi-sectoral approach. So the lesson that I would like to share with you here is that, you know, early and the specialized intervention in GBV cases can that they support that the victims that are getting from the senders or from the units that I'm referring to, you know, they are being done in such a way that, you know, the victims are really being handled by professional. So whoever is involved has to go through a process whereby he or she can now be qualified or be justified that this person is really capable of dealing with issues related to GBV. Otherwise, failure to that, then we are even going to cause a secondary victimization to the victim of abuse. So, and one of the aspects that I also like to share with you as a best lesson is that we also involve the engagement of the community and also the male involvement. I think it was already mentioned here that, you know, previously we were under the impression that, you know, it's only women and children that have to be taken care of. But that was really a gap. And as a result, men had no voice to say anything. And in Namibia, we felt that, you know, in order for us really to curb gender-based violence, we have to make sure that, you know, we involve male counterparts, because by so doing, because these are the men that we are always, you know, regarding them as the main perpetrators. But what are we doing? Do we really only want to always to go and arrest men without any intervention? And as a result, we felt that, you know, it's very important that we also try to bring them on board so that they can be gender responsive. They can also advocate when issues or laws are being, you know, passed. Men will also be on the forefront to support women and whoever is interested to come up with a law. So one of the best lessons that I also love to share with you is the multi-stakeholders collaboration. As I earlier mentioned that, you know, the unit that I'm referring to are we are operating in a disciplinary approach. And here, just to cement what I said earlier, the multi-stakeholders collaboration is very vital in the sense that, you know, we have got a donor partners in our society, and I was very impressed when it was already highlighted here to the previous speakers. So we have got the intervention from all various aspects of life. We have donor partners, we have got UN agencies, we have NGOs, faith-based organizations. Everyone is, you know, involved, and as a result, their involvement differs, or everyone has got a role to play. If just to be specific, with the UN agencies, they have really done quite a number of a significant role in Namibia, because they provide technical support, they capacitated our law enforcement agencies and even the public at large. And as a result, that was also one of the milestones whereby the issue of gender-based violence was really, you know, decreased, because the members or the people that are dealing, or the stakeholders that are dealing with the GBV problems or related issues, they are well capacitated. And even comes to the resources, because government alone cannot do anything. So the partners have really, you know, they have done quite a number of, you know, marvelous job in our society, in our country. Because if they were not there are some areas whereby you find that, you know, such a thing could not have happened. More especially if I can take you back with the establishment of the women of those specialized units, the UN agencies and the civil society organization, they have really done a wonderful job to meet the government halfway. And I'm also just advising the other countries also to really make use of the UN agencies, because if you only wait for the government to do everything, then I don't think that we are really going to realize your dream. So the training capacity that I've just mentioned here, so I already mentioned that the law enforcement agencies have really been capacitated, and then this has not just be a one-off exercises. This is something that it is an ongoing program. So in all our action plan, we always try to even have a platform whereby we involve other stakeholders and we plan together. We share our plans with the UN agencies or with the donor partners so that they can able to tell us, okay, this is where we can offer training or any assistance or any technical support. And through that, the issue of gender-based violence can also be kept holistically. Then coming to the legal framework and policies. I'm very happy to announce to you or to share with you that Namibia is one of the countries with an advanced laws when it comes to the issue of gender-based violence. Why do I say that? You know, our laws are gender sensitive in the sense that whoever committed a crime, whether it is a man or a woman, a child or whatever, you just, all those components are included. So no one is left out. And through that, this also enables the justice system also to deal with this the issue of gender-based violence. Maybe just to give you a practical example, what is happening back home. So I know my fellow women here, you are not going to be angry with me when I mention this. You know, today I happens to be to be abused by my partner. And what happened? I go to the police station because that time I'm bleeding, I'm doing what? But 2 days after, what do? I go and withdraw the case. So we have that challenge. And we were kind of, it was really disturbing the stakeholders or the service providers, more especially the police and the justice system. And we recommend, we made an amendment in our law that a case can only be withdrawn in the court of law. Because previously, immediately after I opened the case, what do? I call the investigating officer that, no, I don't want to proceed with the case any longer because my husband forgive me, or I forgive my husband. And at the end of the day, the same person will come back again to the police station with the same problem. So as a result, what we have done, we stood up and we recommend that in order for us to resolve this problem, all those cases, and it's only when the court is now is satisfied that this case can be withdrawn. And on that note, what we normally do, if we know that, okay, the person, you could really see that the merit of the case is quite, complicated. And now at the end of the day, the person wants to withdraw the case. Then the state will even be the complainant on that case. And we really, we got it right. And it really even empower women or any survivor of abuse or any victim, not just to wake up in the middle of the night that tomorrow I'm going to withdraw the case. You really have to think twice because we'll be disappointed. We know it's your right, but we are also having the mandate to protect the victim and also to make sure that issues of gender-based violence are being reduced.
It's 10 minutes, but so you can wrap up,
Yeah, okay.
in a comfortable way.
All right.
Over the next few.
Okay. Then whatever you do, we have got one of the lesson that I also like to share with you is that, there's nothing that you can do without the data. And data will inform you as to what to do further. Because if you don't really pay much time in having the data, then I don't think that will even do justice whenever you are doing your planning or whenever you want to come up with a mechanism in order for you to reduce the issue of gender-based violence. Because without that, there's nothing that you can do. I was warned here already. And then, okay, one of the lessons that I also like to share with you that we are applying back home is that the victim support and the rehabilitation. So I mentioned earlier that, the specialized unit that I refer to, which is the gender-based violence protection unit, it does operate in a holistical approach. And here, so the victim support that I'm referring here is that, whoever is now the victim that, prey to any kind of abuse, that person is eligible to make sure that everyone that is responsible, or every stakeholders, ranging from the police officer that are on the receiving end, the social workers, medical personnel, the justice system, the civil society, everyone has to be, there must be a very good collaboration among these people. And through that also lessen or limits this, the person will not feel I know the pain will be there, but at least through that, since, everyone is involved, and even the person cannot just be taken from one place, you direct the person to go to Polokwane. From Polokwane, you go to Benoni. From Benoni, you go to Johannesburg. So what we have come up with that, we try to make sure that, we limit this movement of, telling the person to go from one. Instead, we take, if we think that, okay, maybe this is it's not within the setup system, then it's up to us as service provider, more especially the police, to make sure that, we take the person where he or she required to be assisted. Then another one which was already mentioned here is the public awareness. So I know this is a tool to everything, because there's no way that you can combat crime if you don't disseminate information to the people. Otherwise, people will just keep their problem to themselves. At the end of the day, you said, this month is only 2 cases that were reported. It's because the people are not aware. I'm finishing now in 2 seconds. And another thing is also, we make sure that the incorporation, we make sure that the traditional cultural practices is also being dealt with. And that can only be dealt with if you give the right information to the traditional authorities. We also sideline these people, and we tend to forget these are the people that are dealing with their community members on a daily basis. So in order for you to achieve and to realize your dream, you must always include them in your program. You must also give them information. You must train them. Through that, you'll be able to curb crime, and GBV issues will really come to an end. I'm just left with one slide.
I think, okay, one more.
Yeah, it's just one.
Because we had 15 minutes now.
Yeah, in conclusion.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Your talk is so fascinating that we have to hear the end of it. So
yeah,
as quickly as we can.
Yeah. In conclusion, we all know that, we had this pandemic of the COVID-19. So during the COVID-19, we realized that, we picked up a lot of GBV cases. Why? It's because people were all, staying together from 24 hours. And as a result, people could not accommodate one another. And also this issue of dependence has been also something that we realized that, before COVID, whoever is the breadwinner will not be at home. But now you see that, even our movement were limited. And as a result, now that you are demanding for a bread to be on the table, and he or she does not have it, what do you expect at the end of the day? This will result to violence. And as a result, that's why most of the cases of, gender-based violence really went up. So it's just because of that, I have to skip most of the slides. So I was told that, my presentation will be for 25 minutes. It's unfortunately, I was only given 10. But with this few, if you have got any other information that you require from me, I'm available. Thank you very much.
Well, that certainly is most encouraging to hear that talk. And thank you. So I think we must move on to the next talk, because unless we get there are 5 people, we're going to not have much time at the end to discuss. So if I may call up the next speaker. I'm sorry. Salome Minbir addressing the intersection of climate change, conflict, and inequality. You see, it's now nearly midday, I think, and we have until 1 o'clock. So time is precious.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, you have an advantage. I do not speak very well English, so I will speak less. But if you want, I can speak in Portuguese, and I promise you we can stay here till 3 p.m. if you want. So I will speak about the intersection between climate change and conflict and inequality. And to speak about this issue, I taught on my country, and I think Cabo Delgado is the province that shows very well this situation. So my presentation will be around the Cabo Delgado province. My name is Salome, as our moderator said, and I work to the Civil Society Forum for Child Rights. I'm actually the coordinator of the Children Rights Observatory. This is about Roshki. Roshki is my organization. We work on the advocacy of policy to protect children rights in all the country. Cabo Delgado province, we have more than 1.3 million of people displaced by the conflict, the armed conflict since 2017. And we had also the cyclone Kennedy, which is a consequence of climate change and has devastated the province of Cabo Delgado, making people also displaced from their homes. Most of those people are victims of terrorism and also consequence of Cyclone Kennedy happened in 2019. And the victims who displaced because of the conflict have seen men of their family killed or even in a very, very bad situation made by the terrorists. And you also know that Mozambique is a country very severely affected by climate change. And when we have that situation, I mean, conflict and also cyclones and other climate change consequences, women and girls are the most affected. And in Cabo Delgado wasn't different. We have seen so much women and the girls living consequence of these two big problems. Hazroski, we worked with government and other civil society organizations and also international organizations to relieve the situation for women and girls in Cabo Delgado. And we made campaigns and also awareness programs. And we also had very concrete activities to, for example, create safe spaces for women and girls. What we have seen in Cabo Delgado, exactly in Ankwabi, where is our project are being implemented, is that even if the poorest, the poverty affect women and men, When we look to girls and women, the situation is worse. Because in Cabo Delgado, women are the one who is responsible for family. And when I say family, I also talk about men. With this situation of conflict and climate change or kinetic cyclone, women are suffering. This is a photo about an activity made by Roski in Ankwabi district, giving bicycles to women because they use bicycles to make movements and some commercial activities and help them having some income to support their families. So with the government of Ankwabi, we gave bicycles to women and girls. This is a safe place in Cabo Delgado, in Ankwabi, that we built. And these safe places are used by girls and young women to discuss about their rights, their concerns, and also think on how they can support each other in case of VBG, and also to think about forms of having some income and make money to help their families. And I think it is important to say that we didn't build actually any physical space, I mean a home, but we made sessions about rights, about what their women and girls can do, even if they haven't a physical place to discuss about their concerns and think about strategies to overcome their problems. We also have small center. I can call that small center to, yes, okay. A small center to teach them about how to use ICTs. How to use ICTs not only for Ankwabi or Cabo Delgado issues, but mainly to connect with other girls around the world. And we teach them, and after we organize section to make them connected with other girls around the world. And this is a story of change of a girl who is here talking about the changes we made in their life when she joined the project. We will also do a work on with children in these safe places where we help them being occupied with activities, learning about their rights, and also playing, just to not stay in thinking on their how do I say, sorry, if I remember, I'll tell you. And with the movement EUMAS, it is an initiative to disseminate laws to prevent GBV, and also to make people know how they can make a denouncement about the situation of violation of their rights. And we mobilize it, traditional leaders, religious leaders. We use a theater, has Joe say here in their presentation. And also we use ICT phones to make this dissemination. In the Observatory of Children's Rights, we work with sentinels who are activists based in neighborhoods of Ankwabi and Pemba, and they have the role to receive the announcement of children's rights violation. And we also made the barometer of children's rights, which is a document which shows us about the situation of children's rights in the province of Cabo Delgado. So thank you. If you want in Portuguese, you can talk much more about the provincial of Cabo Delgado. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tolomi. We certainly could listen for many more hours. Thank you. The next speaker is Memory Kadau, social activist and feminist from Zimbabwe. Strengthening victim-friendly systems, strengthening victim-friendly systems.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. When Deputy Commissioner was presenting, I couldn't help to see what's, a mirror image of our victim-friendly system are to a certain extent. As introduced, my name is Memory Kadau. I am a researcher, a feminist. I am also a champion for making abortion safe with the Royal College of Gynecologists and obstetricians in London. So I do a lot of activism work. In last year, 2022, 2023, I had an opportunity, thank you to Evelyn. She facilitated the research and review of the victim-friendly system of Zimbabwe. So that's why I found myself here. When she reached out, I was like, oh, well, isn't the government of Zimbabwe supposed to be talking about this? But I had an opportunity to conduct research, talk to several actors within the victim-friendly system. And fundamentally, 3 years of my life, I led an organization in Zimbabwe called the Adult Rape Clinic, which provides medical legal services for survivors of sexual violence. So it gave me an opportunity to look as an insider and as an outsider of the victim-friendly units. And Ambassador, when you're talking, at some point we were strongly convinced that we should go to Namibia and learn more around the victim-friendly system, specifically on sexual violence, because you have a DNA registry, which is very effective, apparently in Southern Africa. So that's part of the lessons, and I thought you're going to highlight that. But for many actors and government officials, I think it is also a strong case to follow up and learn from what Namibia is doing. Because of time, I'll also just highlight, some of the key lessons that the Deputy Commissioner says. I'll start by what the government of Zimbabwe defines as the victim-friendly systems, which is a set of measures designed to ensure the protection and active participation of survivors of survivors in the criminal justice system. And the expectation is when the survivors of the victim have gone through the victim-friendly system, there is, a reestablishment of voice and autonomy. So we are looking at how, to a certain extent, it's not disclaimer, it's not kumbaya, it's not perfect, but key lessons that we can derive from the Zimbabwe victim-friendly system. The first one is the coordination. Within the victim-friendly system of Zimbabwe sits the police, your judiciary, your civil society organization, your key players, those offering services, those that are also offering psychosocial support. So fundamentally, the key lesson in that is coordination. That at every level, at national and national, regional, and district level, there are committees that are set that meet often
to discuss issues around bottlenecks, to review how the victim-friendly system is actually working. So it is something that is actually commendable, where government comes together, where the police also comes together, and civil society actors come together and share challenges. And to a certain extent, they then go to see how they can review and how they can address address some of the issues that have been talked about around the attitudes of police, the attitude of health service providers when victims of gender-based violence or sexual violence visit public health institutions, where some of the issues are addressed, but where other issues require long-term commitment and interventions. And there is also issues around, in terms of interventions, campaign within the victim-friendly unit, where we have seen the key players coming together, running campaigns against gender-based violence, where they go to communities under every tree, just to raise awareness, zero tolerance against gender-based violence. And the key lesson from that is there's inclusion of the police, there's inclusion of the religious leaders, there's inclusion of your chiefs who are the custodians of some of the harmful cultural practices that we're talking about, where they're actually then also included in raising awareness of gender-based violence. And there is training, coordinated training that is happening within the victim-friendly unit. Some of the training is actually led by the government themselves, and some of the training is also led by non-state actors, which is your civil society organizations, where they have taken an intersectional approach to training of police officers, to training of judicial service officers, to training of religious leaders, traditional leaders as well. Because within this training, it's just raising awareness and understanding that gender-based violence disproportionately affects women in a different way. Not that I'm undermining that men do not experience gender-based violence. Statistics from when I was working at ARC indicated that 8% of the survivors that used to walk through our doors were men, actually, who were sexually assaulted. So yes, men do experience gender-based violence. And I would like to commend the coming together of the government and also the funders, the development agencies under the spotlight, where we have actually seen to some form, okay, 2 minutes, I'm concluding. To some form of, to some extent, there have been the addressing of duplication of efforts, where, based on expertise, different players really focus on the work that they experience in. And there's also been the coming up of one-stop shop centers, where a victim can walk in and access all the services that they want. They would receive health service, they would receive, they would report to the police. If it's someone that then even needs an urgent termination of pregnancy, that is facilitated within the one-stop center. The last one, there are many, but because of time, is the legislation, the continuous commitment by the government of Zimbabwe to renew the legislation so that it aligns. For example, we had the review of the child rights, where it actually aligns the age of marriage to 18, because there was that discrepancy, which is a good thing in terms of dealing with child marriages. We also have the multi-sectoral protocol that we have, but of course there are always recommendations. I had prepared recommendations within my presentation, but I will leave that to the final conclusions. But thank you very much.
So it seems that Zimbabwe has a structure which might be reflected in our South African National AIDS Council, which may provide hope for us. Yeah, so South Africa has a structure, the South African National AIDS Council, which seems to have be reflected to some degree in your structures in Zimbabwe. And I know that at some point the Minister of Justice here said we must do in regard to the HIV/AIDS issue, in regard to gender-based violence, the kind of thing that we're doing in regard to HIV. So we're not completely hopeless, but we are behind, no doubt, on gender-based violence, I think. But I might be wrong. I suggest we possibly are. The second last speaker is from Eswatini, and Sibusiso Pesheya. Sibusiso.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hopeful I will make sure that I actually keep time, because I can see that it's no child's play here. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Busiso Siaya from the Kingdom of Eswatini. One must first appreciate the opportunity of being invited here. I thought it was very proper for us as our first meeting to also give a brief background in terms of the introduction, to give you context in terms of what is the country that you are talking about. Eswatini is a country which is estimated to be 17.5 square kilometers with the population of 1.6 million people, 51% being females, and 73% being young people below the ages of 35. So amongst other things we need to note is that the country's legal system of Eswatini, it's a dual kind of system which operates with a common law and what you call a customary law. The common law is more of the Roman Dutch law, and the customary law is based on the traditional systems of the country. This must then inform you that that is a country that in its own making is still holds highly its traditional and cultural beliefs. Hence, therefore, by so, the traditional and cultural beliefs then end up being a pillar of a patriarchal system within the country. So then there is a need, therefore, Director Anna, that I must explain that towards my presentation, I will not only focus on the issue of prevention, we'll also focus on the issue of response, because we are still having challenges even in terms of people reporting the cases. So we still appreciate, so the element of responding is more of strengthening the prevention part, because some tend not to then report on the basis of them being betrayed by the response system. I was just hoping to briefly, but because of time, I will not explain the annual GBV trend from 2017 to 2023. I'll just move quickly. I'm sorry, because of time. These are the cases in terms of by age disaggregation, but specifically on the year of 2023. But in summary, let me summarize those trends as I have presented them, that there has been a 50% increase in reported GBV cases between 2017 and 2023, obviously and significantly informed by the COVID-19 period. Then 66% of the GBV survivors were female, compared to 34% male survivors, but indeed it confirms that males are also victims of gender-based violence. Then we're having GBV incidents that are higher among survivors at the age of 18 years and above, which is 66% above 18 years, and for the 0 to 17 years is 34%. Most of the cases are cases that have been reported to be happening at home, and they are happening and done. The perpetrators are people that are known to the victims. I think we must also observe that. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are able to observe that in the country of Eswatini, there has been an increase, a continued increase in the rate of violence, especially gender-based violence. This has therefore triggered a multiple of initiatives that have been designed, and one of them is being led by a Department of the Gender and its gender and family issues. It's a department within the Deputy Prime Minister's office. It's leading some of the multiple initiatives in terms of responding in particular, in fact, towards prevention and also responding and partner coordination to try and halt the continued increase of GBV. So amongst some of those issues there is one of the most formulated system that has been used is called the National Gender-Based Violence Information Management System. This system seeks to greatly improve the data collection and compilation from all partners into one central point for coordination purposes to try and ensure that there is a more effective data collection and analysis to inform the GBV programming. And secondly, we have what we call the one-stop centers. One-stop centers are centers that have been introduced or being rolled out by the government of Eswatini. These one-stop centers are victim-friendly facilities whereby the victims are able to access in terms of sexual and domestic violence comprehensive services under one roof. The intention is to try and make sure that these one-stop centers are able to give a victim-based a victim-centered and right-based, court-directed kind of approach, putting the victims at the forefront of service delivery in a manner with an intention to try by all possible means to transform the victim into a survivor and more so as an empowered witness throughout the criminal process. Secondly, we have what we call the legal aid unit. The legal aid unit is also led by the Ministry of Justice. So this legal aid unit is a unit whereby legal practitioners are being put under one unit to ensure that there are already available legal practitioners to provide pro bono or geo services, in particular to the victims that cannot afford an attorney. And secondly, the Parliament has just enacted an act recently in 2024, which is called the Civil Registration Act of 2024. It is designed in terms of addressing a complex of issues, which amongst them, it is what we call the implementation of a positive parenting strategy. The positive parenting strategy is aimed at trying to ensure that it is able to address the parenting gaps that have informed the increase of violence, especially by extension, gender-based violence, but more especially violence against children. So I will try to move from some of my slides. With the support, oh, thank you so much, 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. So we have awareness initiatives. I think they have explained. They are more similar in terms of engaging, conducting community dialogues, engaging community leaders, religious leaders, and traditional leaders. So same applies, and some of many programs that are happening in our media forums, in particular our radio stations, conducted by the Royal Eswatini Police for awareness purposes. And in terms of trying to commit towards ending violence, Eswatini has what we call the Sexual Offense Domestic Violence Act, which broadens the legal definition of rape to make the offense gender neutral, and also establishes the age of consent to 18, criminalizing sexual harassments and assaults, and make provisions to protect children from sexual exploitation. The Act also established a national register for sexual offenders. We've got also a Persons with Disability Act, a Witness Protection Act of 2018 that also protects survivors and witnesses while a case is being determined. We've also have a review of the Marriage Act of 1964, which intends to align the law with the Constitution and improve the rights of married women. Amongst other legislative documents is the draft legal aid bill, which I have also explained that it is meant to establish a system to provide a free bono or pro jure services for those who cannot afford an attorney. The areas of priority, though, are child welfare, GBV, violation of sexual and reproductive rights, land and property rights, amongst many others. And also the review of the Employment Act, and also the election of a Women's Act of 2018, which is to fulfill the constitutional requirements of representation quotas for women and marginalized groups in Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want the old men to come back and stop me. But with that, I think in any case, we are having questions, ladies and gentlemen. I think we will be here where you can ask and we'll try to clarify many other things. But most importantly, that's what I want to emphasize to you all. Can we start now ensuring that we are providing robust leadership towards the end, robust and radical leadership towards the end of violence? Can our resources not only be allocated in terms of the strategic part of it, in terms of giving us policies, but let it go back to the poor of the poorest, the most marginalized. Let it guarantee that human being, that indeed their fundamental human rights are guaranteed so long as they live. Thank you.
Thanks, Sibusiso. Yeah, that was an interesting talk, and giving us the list of matters being implemented by the government of Swaziland to deal with the issue of domestic violence. Our final speaker is online, and so somebody's going to have to put them on, put him or her on. Chalumba Muteng, of the IPAS Regional Program Manager, dealing with the nexus findings on child marriages, teenage pregnancies, and school dropouts. Welcome, Chalumba, and please go for it. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, I couldn't join the team physically there, but thanks to technology, maybe partly COVID, we are here today. Yeah, so today, and just to confirm if people can hear me. Hello?
We certainly can hear you clearly, yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'll just dive right into it, maybe due to time. So today I'll be presenting to you the interactions between child marriage, teenage pregnancy, as well as school dropout as an intersectionality of gender-based violence. This is from a scoping exercise that was conducted by IPAS with researchers from the University of Pretoria to explore the nexus of child marriage, teen pregnancy, as well as school dropouts. Then going more specifically into some of the findings, starting by an alarming statistic that we had unraveled from the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals report, which is showing that we are at least 300 years away from ending child marriage. And as most of us may be aware, many child marriages are not consensual, but instead are a form of gender-based violence, where mostly young girls are forced or coerced into marriage by families, even by their communities. And this practice is often driven by patriarchal norms, economic pressures, can be as a result of a desire to control a girl's sexuality, among others, which are all forms of gender-based violence. And in many cases, we see that teen pregnancy is also a direct result of sexual violence, that is including rape, incest, can also even be coercion. And adolescent girls are the most vulnerable and are targeted often by older men or even family members. This often leads to unintended pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies. And girls who experience GBV, who go through sexual violence and many other forms of partner violence, are often forced to drop out of school due to stigma, trauma, or pregnancy. And this does not only disrupt their education, but it also limits their future opportunities and increases their vulnerability to further violence. So we did notice from the statistics that pregnancy and childbirth complications are the leading cause of deaths amongst adolescents aged between 15 and 19 years old. And that 24% of girls are often pregnant before the age of 18. And we also did note that 55% of unintended pregnancy amongst adolescents aged between 15 and 19 end in unsafe abortions, and that 32% of African children are married before the age of 18. Next slide. We've also noted that there have been a lot of efforts to address teen pregnancy and child marriage, dating far back as 1948, when the Declaration of Human Rights was signed. And following which, we've had so many strategies, so many protocols and agreements among others, that's the SADC protocol and gender development. And most recent, we had a 5-year strategic plan between 2019 to 2023 to end child marriage. But despite all these efforts that have been put in place, we'll still see that the issue of teen pregnancy, child marriage, and school dropout still remains high. And this often is exacerbated and is a factor of gender-based violence or contributes to increase in gender-based violence cases. The next slide. We also see the next slide. We see the relationship between teen pregnancy, child marriage, and school dropouts as not being linear. This is more of a relationship that can be triggered by one or the other factor. Child marriage can lead to teen pregnancy, which can lead to school dropout, and subsequently school dropout can lead to teen pregnancy, as well as child marriage. And this often exposes girls to various risks comprising their health, economic potential, including even being susceptible to gender-based violence. And the CTS nexus, of course, is aggravated by limited access to sexual reproductive health services, information, support, among others. And this has a potential to worsen gender-based violence cases amongst adolescents if this is not addressed urgently. Focusing in, and also looking at time, focusing in on 3 countries in particular, where the focus was targeting Mozambique, that is 2 slides after this one. Mozambique, Uganda, as well as Zambia. Mozambique, strategically, because it's a Portuguese-speaking country, wanted to see some diversity across Sub-Sahara. So there, we did note that there has been a lot of progress that have been made in terms of child marriage and teen pregnancy, but it still remains high, with 52% of adolescents being married by the age of 18. And we note that the percentage of women aged between 20 to 24 gave birth before they were even 18. And poverty, as well as the economic and humanitarian crisis, has also increased these scourges, as we see rape and incest, among others, being used as a weapon of war in some regions in Mozambique. In Uganda, we see that teen pregnancy has been stagnant for the most part between 2006 all the way to 2021. And despite efforts and policies being implemented, there is lack of implementation and, of course, working in silos, leaving this scourge in isolation. Teen pregnancy has also remained high in Uganda, with 34% of adolescent girls being married before the age of 18. Then in Zambia, we see that there has been some trends and efforts towards addressing teen pregnancy and child marriage, as well as school dropouts. But we see that there has been a reluctance in parents and adolescents to receive comprehensive sexual reproductive health and rights. And we also see that there has been an increase in dropout rates amongst girls. This was a result of research conducted in 29 districts. We see at present that 29% of women aged between 20 and 24 give birth before they are 18. Similarly, teen pregnancy, most adolescents before the age of 18 or at 18 years old have had at least 1 child. Some common challenges that were noted from this scoping study was, firstly, that there is lack of communication. Limited access to information often presents as a barrier. And then also one-directional communication, where the adults are the ones telling the kids, but not vice versa. Social and cultural norms also remain rife. Initiation rights, girls' education, cultural norms that prevent girls from accessing education, as well as gender norms. And also capacity, parents and educators to provide SRH education and information and weak policy implementation. Partnership also remain an Thank you. Just winding up. Partnerships remain an issue, lack of coordination, duplication of efforts, as well as duplication of resources. And the one consistent challenge we noted was also data. There has been insufficient data and lack of information available to inform decision-making, to inform policy, among others. So we note that collectively, we can use these challenges as opportunities to make sure we focus on communication, improve social and cultural norms, capacity, partnership, as well as data to unlock the full potential of our CTS nexus and its underlying effects on gender-based violence for particularly adolescent girls and young women. Thank you so much. It was rushed, but I hope we can have more conversations beyond this. Thank you, and over to you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for returning on time and for allowing us to be able to resume the program. I sincerely hope that everyone had a delightful lunch and you also had time to get some refreshments. I see we still have colleagues that are joining us. Thank you very much for trickling in. I think I might have the lighter task of engaging happy people who've had lunch. So I can see that we are going to have a very nice conversation here. My name is Nangamso Kwinana. I am born and raised in Cape Town, South Africa. I work within the programs unit at African Monitor, and I also work with coordinating the Africa Region Hub as part of an initiative of the Global Forum for SDGs Advisory Bodies. And I have a very great pleasure of being the moderator of this afternoon's dialogue with our esteemed panelists here. Just to give an overview of how we are proposing to go about having this conversation, we can allocate 10 minutes to each of our speakers. We will continue to engage the audience and the guests that are connected on the hybrid system, meaning that once we've had each speaker present and relay their reflections, we will then go over to the all-inclusive discussion, meaning that we are discussing as us that are physically here, and we are also joined by our colleagues that are on the monitors and on the screens. If there's anything that is not clear, please feel free, especially when we get to the engaging part. It's meant for all of us to have a dialogue, to have conversation. Feel free and feel open to please come in, ask clarity-seeking questions, and relay any of your initiatives. I'll start on my far left and invite Mr. Simpiwe to please join us. Simpiwe, if you can please briefly introduce yourself, and then also we can go ahead and project your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nangamso, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simpiwe Mabele. I am with the International Labour Organization. This is one of the UN specialized agencies. I am heading health and wellness programs. This includes gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. So moving to my presentation, Nangamso, I'm going to have to start with a disclaimer. It's just a quick one. And I'm doing this for 3 reasons, because there's too much light, I have big eyes, and if I don't mention it, I'll be in trouble. I have a condition called asymmetrical blinking. So what this means is my eyes do not blink at the same time. One eye blinks, and then a few seconds later, another eye blinks. So you can imagine if I'm looking at your direction and one eye is blinking, you may think I'm sending some signals. So I apologize in advance. If you happen to witness it, please just wait for the other eye. I'm not sending any message, yeah. So I actually want to spend the remaining 9 minutes, Nangamso, just to reflect on the following. Just to talk a little bit about the ILO, and I want to define and locate the world of work. It's not a new concept, but it has not been used. You may be familiar with workplace, but the world of work is an emerging concept. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to focus on what is called decent work deficits. And then I move on to one of the latest conventions in the ILO, which focuses on violence and harassment. But what I will do during this presentation, and pardon me right now because I'm going to skip some slides, I have about 3 areas that I want to spotlight. I want to spotlight violence and harassment within the world of work context. I want to spotlight locating gender-based violence and harassment within occupational safety and health. And then finally, I want to spotlight intersectionality. If you were to ask me, Simpiwe, what is the ILO? Just in one line, before Nangamso stops me, I would say the ILO is an international labor standard setting organization. And currently there's about 405 instruments that the ILO has set. Now, I joined the ILO 17 years ago. And when I joined the ILO, I remember that year, the 1st of June was on a Friday. And I was with my daughter, who was 15 at the time, Nangamso, and she saw a waving flag. And I had told my family that I'm joining the International Labour Organization. And the waving flag was written International Labour Office. And my daughter said, "Pops, can I ask you something?" And you know, as a parent, you know when you are going to be asked a question that will corner you. I could feel it coming. And she asked, "You said you are joining International Labour Organization, but I see International Labour Office. What is the difference?" And I could not tell. But I have to be, you know, a smarter parent. And then I said, "Oh, I'll have to check this. I'll come back to you, actually." So the reason I'm mentioning this is one of the unique structure of the ILO, and it's important. You'll hear in my following remarks why I'm mentioning this. So the ILO is a tripartite organization. And pardon me, South Africans, because I know when you say tripartite in South Africa, it's the ruling party, SAPC, and COSATU. But no, this time around, tripartite means we bring together governments from 187 member states. We bring together employers in all the 187. We bring together trade unions as well. So that's what tripartite means. So the distinction between International Labour Organization and the office is Simpiwe, who is in front of you, is from the International Labour Office. But the governments, if there are people who are from government here, they are from the organization. If you are from private sector employers, you are from the organization. If you are from trade unions, you are the organization. So that is very critical when it comes to the work that we do. The concepts that are around us are around the term called decent work. And the decent work agenda is characterized by 4 pillars. 1, rights at work. 2, employment creation. 3, social protection. And then finally, social dialogue. And I'll explain what this means in a short while. This is where I just want to spend maybe another minute. If you were to ask me, the world of work, how do we define it? And I'll show you this diagram. The minute you have someone who is looking for employment, they have entered the world of work. They don't have to sign a contract with anyone. In the world of work, we have people who are referred to as interns, volunteers. We have people who are referred to as domestic workers, even though the term they would prefer is care workers. People who are working in our households, they are part of the world of work. And the world of work is characterized by only 3 horizontal sectors. You have public sector. In South Africa, for an example, there's 2.4 million people that are working for government. They are in the world of work. Private sector, which employs about 15.6 million people. And then civil society. The NGOs that you have, they are actually part of the world of work. The people who work there, who provide services, they are part of world of work. If the work that we do, which is located within international labor standards, it's actually based on ranging from violence and harassment, it would be conditions of employment. So this is the work that we support as the ILO. So when there's an issue, we locate it within the space of international labor standards. Now, so spotlight number 1, and this is where I'm actually going to fast forward, violence and harassment in the world of work. Violence and harassment is unacceptable anywhere, at any time, whether in the times of prosperity or times of crisis. We know during COVID, it showed us flames that because we were in crisis and we saw violence and harassment, gender-based violence increasing as well. So in 2019, the ILO and the organization this time around, not the office, took a decision to adopt the first and the only international labor standard focusing on violence and harassment. And this document is called Convention 190. You may have heard people talk of C190. So this is the C190 that we talk about. I thought there were 3 countries, but I was advised that there's about 7 or 8 countries. So pardon me if your country doesn't appear there. I only picked information about Botswana, Lesotho, and South Africa. But all the countries that are here, believe you me, they are the member states of the ILO. But I thought I should just share a glimpse of ratification in terms of this C190. So C190 has now been ratified in 44 out of 187 member states. But if you ask me, Simpiwe, how many of those in Africa? 9. I'm not trying to say anything, including Uganda, and including Lesotho, including South Africa. But out of the 9, 4 are in Southern Africa. And that is actually a step forward. So that is Mauritius, that is Namibia, that is South Africa, and that is Lesotho. So we still have 143 countries that have not yet ratified. So this C190 is about freeing the world from violence and harassment. So the next slides, this is where I'm skipping Nangamso. But I want to mention that the countries that have ratified, and at least the 44, they have highlighted about 12 reasons why they have ratified. And amongst those reasons, it's because they want to prevent and address the rise of violence and harassment beyond the physical workspace. And that is why I raise the issue of the world of work. Because when you think of the workplace, you imagine an office with a desk, with a swinging chair that Simpiwe maybe is sitting at. But the world of work, people are working anywhere. Those of us who are here because we are representing our organization, we are at work. This is the world of work. So there's a list of these reasons why the C190 was ratified. So it does have content, C190. Article 1, for an example, defines violence and harassment as a range of unacceptable behaviors, practices, and threats thereof, whether a single occurrence or repeated. Because sometimes there's a tendency to say, no, maybe I need to do it 3 or 4 times. Then it can become single occurrence. Spotlight number 2, no, I have to bring this one. We actually have a guide that is attached to C190. And this is, we call it the LGBTIQ plus guide in the inclusion of LGBTI persons in the workplace. And it provides guidance not only to the employers, but to other workers that are there as well. Locating violence and harassment within occupational safety and health. Occupational safety and health in 2022, it was elevated to become a fundamental principle and right at work. So it means we now have to up our socks, because when it comes to violence and harassment, it affects people physically, it affects people psychologically and otherwise. And all those areas are within occupational health and safety. This is my last spotlight, Nangamso, intersectionality. Some of us, if not all of us here, may be aware of this term. It's not a new term, neither it's so old. You may have heard who coined the term, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, a civil rights human activist in the US, who defined it as an approach that actually examines how different aspects of our lives, be it social or political identities, when they combine to create unique modes of discrimination and privilege. So I wanted to leave by highlighting this diagram that we all have different identities. For an example, and some of these identities are part of the legal framework. As a South African myself, I am classified as a black person. And that's an identity that I have, but it's not the only identity. I could identify having a visual impairment. I could also identify as having a relationship with another man. I could identify as a gay person. So my identity could be located within sexual orientation, gender expression or gender identity, and sexual characteristics. And I could also be living with HIV. So that is why we say intersectionality is going to be very important, because when now these collide on one person, they actually create some of the biggest challenges we may have. Maya Angelou, Nanga, I'm so sad, and I open quotes, never make someone who treats you like an option, whereas to them, you know, if to them you are an option, not a priority, then you should make sure that you either walk away or move on, because we would all like to be made priorities. So never make someone a priority when you are all to them an option. Thank you very much. And I'm back to you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Simpiwe. And just to remind everyone, we are following the sub-theme, the United Nations Collective Response to Gender-Based Violence. And thank you very much for cueing us and introducing it so eloquently. We'll now move over to Remy, who'll share some insights with us from UNESCO.
Thank you so much. Right, thank you so much, and for breaking the ice. I'm not as funny as Simpiwe. So I will speak on preventing school-related gender-based violence. I'm from UNESCO in a team called Education for Health and Wellbeing. And our team supports both East and Southern Africa, 21 countries, and we have another team in West and Central Africa. So we cover Sub-Saharan Africa on education for health and well-being. And I'm happy that in this meeting we have colleagues from the education sector, and that's quite important, especially when we're looking at prevention of violence. So some data: we know that 35% of women in the world have been victims of physical or sexual violence at some point in their lives. We also know that between 100 and 140 million women and girls have gone through female genital mutilation in 29 countries where the data is available. And today across the world, more than 700 million women were married before reaching the age of 18. And approximately 246 million girls and boys are victims of bullying, violence at or on their way to school every year. And girls are particularly vulnerable. In our region, the East and Southern Africa region, we experience high rates of physical violence, including corporal punishment, which is a form of violence. Girls and those who do not conform to traditional gendered norms are at greater risk of sexual violence and harassment. And female adolescents, interestingly, are more likely to hold violence condoning attitudes in their region. So for instance, find it acceptable for a man to beat his wife. So what is school-related gender-based violence? And this is how we define it, that it is any act or threat of sexual, physical, psychological violence occurring in and around school or on the way to or from school. And it's perpetrated as a result of gender norms and stereotypes enforced by unequal power relations. So if you get the definition of gender-based violence, which I appreciate that everyone probably already knows, if that violence happens in and around schools, on the way to and from school, it is referred to as school-related gender-based violence. So whilst boys experience more physical violence and corporal punishment, what we're seeing is that girls experience more psychological bullying, cyberbullying, sexual violence, and harassment. This violence, and here on the right, you see the different forms of violence. But it's important for us to appreciate the fact that it can happen in a physical space like this one or in a school setting, but it can also happen virtually. And it can transcend between virtual and in person. So, for instance, a person takes a photo of a fellow student and posts it online. We know the effects of school-related gender-based violence on the physical and mental health of young people. Experience of school-related gender-based violence can lead to depression, feelings of worthlessness, drug and alcohol abuse, and increased risk of suicide and violent behaviors. It can also impact school attendance, and I think we heard that in the morning when colleagues were speaking around school dropouts. Fear of sexual abuse at schools is often a factor in preventing girls from receiving a full spectrum of education, and some of the consequences are highlighted there. So why should then we focus on schools for prevention of school-related gender-based violence? We know that education is the key to the global integrated framework of sustainable development goals that our resident coordinator spoke to earlier this morning. It is at the heart of our efforts both to adapt to change and to transform the world which we live in. It was Norma, I think, in the morning who spoke about the fact that we are trying to unlearn and relearn centuries, if not millennia, of social norms over a short period of time. And so schools are a critical component for that transformation. At UNESCO, under the Education for Health and Well-being, we have a strategy that focuses on 3 pillars. One is on resilient school health systems, so linking education to the health sectors. The second one is on good quality gender transformative CSC. And the last pillar is on safe, inclusive environment. We want to work together with the countries to make learning and teaching safe for learners and teachers. We also use the whole school approach to school-related gender-based violence response, which is really critical as it looks at not GBV, not just a single problem in a single community, but the fact that we need to bring different stakeholders together. So if you're looking at codes of conduct for teachers, for instance, rights education for learners, engagement of community members and parents, the training of teachers themselves is important. Sorry, let me just drink some water. I was hoping it took something stronger. I borrowed that joke from Nelson Mandela. So just to zoom into 3 aspects. One is CSC as a pathway to addressing school-related gender-based violence. Through CSC, we support prevention of gender-based violence around the key concepts and topics. So if you get the CSC that is delivered in school, you will find key concepts that unpack the issues around consent, intimate partner violence, and how and where to seek help. We also have the gender norms pathway that is challenging unequal gender norms and power dynamics. We have the transversal competencies and skills around empathy, respect, positive communication, values, really the social-emotional learning. And we also have the whole school approach that I mentioned earlier on. Another spotlight I want to bring is the Connect with Respect, which is around prevention of gender-based violence in schools. It's a comprehensive program that looks at teaching violence prevention through helping learners to acquire useful knowledge, adopt positive attitudes, and develop respectful relationships. So how can learners connect with respect in the classroom, in the school environment, in the home? Not just among themselves, but also with the parents and the teachers as well. And it's designed to assist teachers to prevent the expression of gender-based violence in school settings. There are activities that a teacher can pick on and deliver with the learners. It's also designed to help students to understand these key concepts that are important in the prevention of gender-based violence. And one of the highlights is the issue on naming the behavior. To name the behavior. If we heard correctly from Jen this morning, that when she experienced the abuse and the violation, it was only later that she was able to say, oh, what I experienced was actually rape. So it's important for learners as early as possible to learn and to name the behavior. I think this is one of my last slides, just some practical actions for a holistic response to school-related gender-based violence, which also touches on the whole school approach. The fact that we need laws and policies, and not just on the shelves, but them being implemented and us holding each other to account. That the environment needs to be safe and supportive, the school environment. Simple things as lighting in the school areas, where bathrooms are located and so on. Prevention through curriculum, teaching and learning, responses in and around schools with community members, partnership with different players, including the private sector, and obviously evidence. I'm a Zambian, so I do keep time, and this is the end of my session. Thank you.
I think Remy is just bragging that in primary and high school, he got all the gold stars because he definitely did keep to time. And he definitely did give us a strong sip of some rich content. So thank you so much, Remy. We'll now move over to our next speaker. If we can please invite Chinwe from the UN Population Fund.
Thank you very much. So my name is Chinwe Obunna. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, based in Johannesburg. We cover 23 countries in East and Southern Africa. And we've been asked today to share a bit of our work, our multi-country approach to prevention of GBV. And I'd like to anchor again the presentation around the theme. When we asked our comms colleagues, usually when we develop content, we turn it over to our comms colleagues and they help us make sure it represents our visibility. And the first question our regional comms person asked me is who will be in the room and what was the theme? And as soon as she saw the theme, she said hope. And what demonstrates hope? Greenery. If you're in a desert and you start having buds of green leaves, there's hope that you will have food. If you're in a humanitarian situation and you see food security brings hope. If you're in the space that we're having a conversation, anything that gives life, anything that gives dignity, anything that gives equality brings hope. And so I want to give credit to that team for able to do this. And so I'd like to start off similar to what my colleagues have said. For us in the United Nations, and if you heard the resident coordinator for South Africa speak this morning, he tried to connect the dots of what the UN system does as a whole. And I think that that's what this session is meant to be. It's meant to show us the interconnectedness across our work, not our agency flags. And I'll try to do that in the presentation and highlight some of those flagships that we pull together. The very first one, you see the emblem of the United Nations that brings us all together. The other is around a significant milestone that happened 30 years ago, similar to the independence of South Africa, on the International Conference on Population and Development. What did it simply say? Put people at the center of development. If you do not put people at the center of development, if you do not put the human face, don't just call numbers, put human beings at the center, then you'll be able to have meaningful conversations. So you'll see the SDG, the 17 goals that are there that connect that people-centered development in 1994 to what we all adopted as member states, as civil society, as different actors in 2015. And then going on there is the fact that the African government as well, with its long-term vision, also adopted the Africa that Africa wants. And again, if you look at the catchphrase for the Africa we want, it also puts, it says, with shared prosperity and well-being, unity and integration, full potential of its women and youth. And one wonders, why did the African Union and the member states in Africa choose to anchor on women and youth? Simple, the population. The Africa's population is split 49-51, 51 female, 49 male. If you split it by categories of population, Africa is a youthful population. So how can you craft a future of a continent when you don't have the women and youth at the table? So I've been looking around and wondering, who are the young people in the room? I know someone who came up and said, oh, don't be deceived, I'm not young. But I've been trying to spot out the young people. And I think it's a very critical message that when we say we have conversations about issues that affect a segment of the population, we have to have them in the room. We have to have them at the table. If not, we are not speaking truth to power. Then Simpiwe talked about intersectionality. And again, with the theme, we surely have hopes that bind across these different frameworks that I've highlighted that affect the African population, that affect Southern Africa and the countries that we're focusing on today. So I won't spend time on this, but this is just a visual to say there is no single entity or a single actor that can do it alone, because the agenda is interconnected. The issue we're discussing has intersectionality. No single sector can deal with it. So the collectiveness of all of us is what is important. And as UNFPA, working with all our entities, we focus on some of the SDGs, but I want to, since we're discussing around GBV, there are two SDGs that anchor around GBV, SDG 3 and SDG 5. And for us, one of the things that we try to rally and convene and broker and be a trusted partner is the areas that we see that intersect around universal access to sexual reproductive health and rights, which are significant targets for SDG 3 and SDG 5. One is around the bodily autonomy that we've been discussing. How can a woman make a decision about her body? And knowing fully well that that requires empowerment, that requires agency. Also, depending on what your sexual orientation is as well, you also require bodily autonomy and you require agency. It could be playing out in the space of access to family planning. It could be playing out in the area of making sure that you don't die while giving life. So preventable maternal deaths. And we know that there are also correlations between being able to access family planning and being able to experience or experiencing gender-based violence, depending. There's an intersectionality there. There's some women who, because they want a certain type of family planning, do experience gender-based violence. There's also gender-based violence related maternal deaths that we know. And also focusing, zoning in on the gender-based violence, whether it be rape, intimate partner violence, or through any other harmful practice that we'll discuss subsequently. It is something that should not happen. It is unacceptable in this day and age, and we have to find ways to move beyond the talk and the rhetoric and the gatherings and all of that. And I'll come to that as I end. Linked to that as well in this region, Southern Africa, is HIV. We know that there is a very strong correlation between HIV and gender-based violence. So what is it that we need to do? And for us, I won't spend time on the data because I know that there's been a lot on the data. This isn't moving. Is it sticking? Okay. I know that there is a lot that has been said about data, but I just wanted to zone in again because I won't repeat the data that we've heard around GBV, but I'll zone in on the bodily autonomy one. The fact that globally, the data shows that 55% of women are able to make a decision about their body. In Southern Africa, higher than the global average, 64. In East Africa, I bring East Africa so that you will have a comparison, that's about 53. So should we rest on our oars to say, oh yes, because I have the capacity to make a decision about my body, we're home and dry? The answer is no. Because beneath that, we still know that even though women have the bodily autonomy and have the ability to make the decision, there is still intimate partner violence happening. So talk less of, forget about the rape, right? We're talking about close relations. We're talking about spouses. We're talking about partners. Women in Africa are still higher than the global average. So you'll see that if you flip it in decision-making, we seem to be doing well, right? But in the experience of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, we are still lower. So there is something happening there that we need to be able to understand that you have the agency, that you have the bodily autonomy doesn't actually mean you won't experience gender-based violence or intimate partner violence. Female genital mutilation, one of the worst violations of human rights, still happening. Another child marriage, brides becoming wives and becoming mothers, totally not acceptable. So how do we approach it as UNFPA in our own space within the UN system? We try and use a multi-layered approach that enables us to partner across the entities, be it national governments, be it private sector, be it other UN entities, and there are about 4, and I won't go into them, but just to highlight that they're interconnected. One cannot exist without the other. Individual, I've mentioned it, agency, being able to make a decision, being able to have access, not just have access and then use that access that you have, because I could have access and then I'm not able to use it because of other barriers that are around. Interpersonal, what's happening in the household, what's happening in the workplace, like Simpiwe says, what's happening in school. There is that interaction with interpersonal, and we have to unlock that, and that's an area that we focus. Community, what are we doing with the traditional institutions and with the religious institutions, with community leaders, opinion leaders, all community structures, very, very critical. At the institution and system level, we also know that it's very critical, especially around data. What systems do we have and that we are supporting? We support censuses, national censuses. We support dedicated thematic demographic and health censuses. We support other dedicated surveys, operations research. What is it that is happening that helps us to have the evidence and analyze it and then use it to correct the barriers and the structural issues that we have? At the macro level, again, how do we make sure that all the sectors are speaking to one another? And we have a lot of examples of how all of these work as one. And we also have evidence that when one tries to coexist by itself, the evidence doesn't support that result that we're getting from that silo, let's say program that only focuses on adolescent girl agencies. Knowing that that adolescent girl lives in a household, lives in a community, you have to be able to target, and is shaped by laws and policies that are happening and accountability mechanisms that may not be important, that this multi-layered approach to GBV prevention is pursued. So our take from what we've learned, we're in a lot of countries, all the 50, 54, 55, depending on what you think African Union is. In Africa, in East and Southern Africa, all the 23 countries, we have global footprint. And we know that harmful gender and social norms fuels violence. It significantly fuels violence, it deepens inequalities, and it limits potential. So it doesn't give us hope, harmful ones, but the positive ones do. So how do we get the evidence around those positive norms, those positive practices? So again, this morning, the resident coordinator spoke about positive masculinity, very, very critical. And we know that for transformative change to take root, it requires scale and it requires pace. We do a lot of little things. For us to address the numbers that we need to address, we have to come together. It has to be collective. Like I said, no single entity. And we have to have accountability and mechanisms. And I like to throw out a challenge. When I heard that we're coming to the second symposium, I asked my colleague, so what was the outcome from this first symposium? I'm hoping that as we start the second symposium, someone's going to stand up and say, this is what we agreed at the first symposium. How far have we gone? So I'm hoping that the third symposium will be able to look at the first and the second symposium and hold our feet to the fire and say, how far have we come? Right, at the third symposium. So again, hopefully, whether I'm in this region or not, I'll listen to it. I know I will not be in this region for a fact because I'm moving on next year, but I will look out because it's very, very important for us to be accountable to what we say we will do as a collective and as individuals. And that's what a lot of the learning and exchange is all about. What have we done? How are we exchanging? How are we learning? And how are we using flagship programs? And I'd like to shout out to all the partners that we have in the room who have continued to support a lot of our flagship programs. But I'd like to quickly, before I'm told to stop, I'd like to quickly make an important point around that. And if I have time, I'll come to the, okay, perfect. Something that is very, very important for us to understand the numbers and the faces and the dimensions beyond national averages. National averages mask the problem. And UNFPA uses a lot of our data capacity. We pride ourselves to say that we're a data agency. We do a lot of hotspot analysis. We do a lot of disaggregated data analysis to help national governments and partners to say, this is where the problem is. And that will go down to the lowest administrative point, so that even if a young person or a woman wants to speak, or you challenge your member of parliament, you'll be able to say, this is what the data tells me. It doesn't lie. This is where the problem is. And then you layer it, and you also have the intersectionality, like the other slide there, that is looking at women vulnerable to GBV living in WASH. WASH is water and sanitation and hygiene. So what's happening there? What's the correlation happening there? And that's what we need to do a lot more of, to understand what's beneath those numbers. Similarly, for South Africa, we mapped hotspots of teenage pregnancy, because we know that there's an intersection there with family planning, with preventable maternal deaths, with GBV, with HIV. So you have to map it and then keep going lower and unpacking it. So it's an area, I know that one of the panelists, I think the Deputy Commissioner for Namibia, highlighted it. And again, just amplifying that for us, we encourage a lot of national GBV prevalence surveys. We have some that have gone on in South Africa, some that have gone on in South Sudan. South Sudan, very critical because it's protracted crisis, because it's important for us to look at humanitarian space, development space, and peace, because GBV in those dimensions are different. So we can't use one size fit all. We need to keep supporting technical guidance, which is what we do, to use a lot of multi-country studies and research and technical guidance to say what works. This is what works. We need to do a lot more of it. We need to scale issues of disability that plays out in GBV space. And again, supporting continental structures. I asked a question to one of my colleagues. I'm like, okay, no, but we're having conversations about Southern Africa. Is Southern Africa Development Community in the room, SADC? Because they have a lot that they're doing, and that we need to be able to bring them into that fold to say what they're doing. So the African Union, based on what the resident coordinator highlighted, the president of South Africa is leading that champion. And as I end, I'm hoping there are just some things I'd like to throw out there, that as you discuss tomorrow, I may be online tomorrow, most likely, but please, the hotspot analysis is important. We need to be able to have laser focus. It can't be one size fit all for GBV. We have to throw everything we have to be able to narrow down and name it, like we've been saying, and make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. Look at populations left behind and be able to target accordingly. The pace of systems change must then be driven by those targeted and tailored investments. There's constrained resources. Nobody has all the resources. So we have to invest wisely, and then to be able to unlock a lot of the proportions of domestic financing. Simply, we're discussing next week. Brilliant. The United Nations system in South Africa is bringing Johannesburg Stock Exchange to the table, the GBV fund, the private sector, launching a coalition to do something about this. So it's not just, and those are very critical strides that we need to keep unlocking, and innovative financing linked to that. The synergies I mentioned, we have to keep working together. We can't afford to duplicate our resources or our time or our effort. So anything that we can do to keep connecting the dots is very critical. And lastly, we must empower the citizens with the accountability, with the data to speak, and have the voices to hold all of us accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from Evelyn Anguma, Anthony Moray Hethen, and Nongamza for steering this ship up to this far. We really appreciate, though the time is against us, we will try to keep it as short and straight to the point. My name is Mr. Gates. I am the founder of the organization called Men Up. I am from Mpumalanga. I'm not alone with the co-founder of the organization, Nkosinathi Nhlebo. He's in the house as well. We are doing mostly working in the part of GBV. We are concentrating in men and boys. So you will see that we are a little bit behind. There's a statistics that I want to share with you. The reason I'm not sitting there, I'm trying to catch your attention. I want to try to connect with you while I'm talking. Oh, I can see there's a hand.
Thank you. sorry, I'm really apologies for interrupting. Can we maybe put a certain, process to say, are we continuing or are we going to get tea? Or because the movement, it's some people are going, some are seated, many meetings, everything. Are we focused? I think let's make that decision before you proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much. Organizers of the event, can you guide us? Yeah, please, let's get a clarity. So, but while they are doing that, I just want to share with you some few stats. Number one, there's a stat that says 18 men commit suicide daily in South Africa. Now, that's a huge number. If you multiply that by 365 days, you'll see. Now, I normally say, if you see the tree dies, the problem is not on the leaves, but the problem might be where you planted the tree. The problem might be maybe the tree is not getting enough fertilizer, or there's no water that is watering the tree. That is why you see the results from the leaves. Now, what is happening earlier on, it is mentioned that if we are not focusing in the boy child, we will continuously try to deal with the issue of gender-based violence because we are focusing in the wrong side. The equipped person, it's highly impossible for an equipped person to live with the unequipped person. If you are more empowered, it is mostly highly impossible for you to live with someone that is not empowered. So now it's very important as we groom the girl child not to leave the boy child. That will assist us. Number two, 50 men are killed daily in South Africa in the hands of another man. We've got 18 that commit suicides. We've got 50 of them that they are killing each other. Now, study that was done by Red Cross, it shows us that 50% of all sexual abuses are children, and 30% of those are boys. I want to give our speaker, as they're about to deal with these issues, we put that in our mind as to say, if the study shows us that 50% of all sexual abuses are children, and 30% of those are boys. Study by Matrix as well shows us that 44% of all boys in South Africa have suffered some form of sexual abuse by the age of 18. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you our next speaker, who is here, Josephine Mukwendi, who is a regional program specialist, Sonke Gender Justice. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. It's a pity that this conversation is actually, we're having this conversation at the graveyard shift. We call it a graveyard shift. People are sleeping, people want to leave, people are looking at their watch. But I think it's a very key conversation. If ever we want to eradicate GBV, I think this conversation is key. My name is Josephine, as the moderator is introduced. I work for an organization called Sonke Gender Justice, and my role specifically is to support a network which we call the Men Engage Africa Network, which is part of a global network of organizations that work. Basically, we work with men and boys for gender equality, just to put it. So my job here is very simple. I loved already when we started, I think the ambassadors and all the previous speakers have been touching specifically on why we should work with men. I think it's one of the ambassadors who mentioned earlier on to say, and my lovely moderator has actually said, if ever we want to, find our solutions, we can never leave men behind, as much as they are the perpetrators, but they're equally part of the solution, right? we definitely need the men in this conversation that we're having. I think someone earlier on in the morning said, we're seeing so many women here. I think it's the ambassador. Where are the men, right? We need men to be part of the solution, right? So I'm just going to share some of the work that we do as Men Engage. And I'm also very quite excited to know that we have actually some Men Engage partners in this room. And if moderator, if you could allow me 2 minutes as I end, just to hear some of the work that is already happening in some of the countries that are here who are part of Men Engage. So what is the role for men and boys in the prevention of GBV? So as I've mentioned, I'm part of the Sonke Gender Justice Family, which is an organization that was founded in 2006. And we have offices in Joburg, Cape Town, Kampala, Cameroon, and Botswana, right? And our staff complements about 80. And we're the secretariat of the network that I've mentioned, which is called the Men Engage Africa Network, which is part of a global network. And basically our role is to strengthen the government, civil society, and citizens' capacity to support men and boys to take action to promote gender equality, prevent domestic and sexual violence, and reduce the spread and impact of HIV. I would also want to mention that the Men Engage network that I've mentioned earlier on was also founded in 2006, and Sonke is the secretariat. I'm not going to talk about what is GBV because I think all of us have an idea, right, of what GBV is. That's why we are here. You would ask, I mean, as Sonke Gender Justice, the approaches that we use to address GBV, obviously working through the Men Engage chapter, but also as Sonke, is through social and gender norms transformation. I think our donors earlier on mentioned issues around gender norms transformation. So we work, we use the gender norms transformations as a strategy, to engage men and boys and to encourage positive masculinities. I think already there were conversation as well around positive masculinity. And gender transformation programs that we work on, they involve men and boys. They are normally often designed to enable them to explore the rigid social norms about being a man, right, around being around manhood or boyhood, and they examine the cost and consequences of the norms for men, women, children, and their communities, and explore positive, alternatives, right? And you would then ask, why specifically should we work with men and boys? Why? To answer the question, we know definitely that violence and unequal power reflected between men and boys is one of the root causes of violence against women, right? And obviously we've made my predecessor speakers have also mentioned to say GBV continues to be a big challenge. That's why we're all here, right? GBV continues to be a major challenge globally, calling for a multi-dimensional intervention at the individual, community, and social level to challenge the structural drivers of such violences, including masculinities, harmful norms, and practices. Again, why do you think, and you are seeing already in the pictures that I've put there, some of the men, the ways that we've engaged men in that's one of our training that we did with imams. But why again work with men? So we create space, working with men creates spaces to confront patriarchal notions of being male, the root causes of gender inequality, and negative or risky masculinities that lead obviously to GBV. We also work with men and boys because it's a key advantage to gender equality, to advancing gender equality, to reduce inequalities, and improving the lives of women and men. We also work with men and boys to promote a behavioral change in men and boys through identification and promotion of positive notions of masculinities. And lastly, we work with men and boys to make GBV a societal, not just a women's issue, but a societal issue, creating opportunities to address behaviors that lead to violence.
As we conclude in 3 minutes time.
Minutes?
3
Okay,
minutes.
fine. I'm gonna speed up. So these are the strategies that we work with men. So we do community workshops and dialogues. I think those who have been following work with Sonke would have seen that we even go into taverns where we find men. And normally it's men that have conversations with men, literally to engage from a grassroots point, but also peer-to-peer, right? And then we do public awareness events and campaigns. We also do a lot of policy and advocacy, and then we engage with the media, you know, to challenge or to highlight certain gender equality issues. And how do we work? So this is when I want to bring my colleagues that are here. We do capacity building, and I've given examples there because we are in 24. I also forgot to mention that the Men Engaged Network is in 24 countries. In Southern Africa, we work with all the countries within Southern Africa. So we provide capacity with communities on gender transformation, on GTN, gender transformation and trainings. And I'm going to call my colleague from Namibia to just share, once I'm done with the slide, just some of the activities that they are doing, you know, in terms of working with men and boys for to eradicate GBV. We also do community awareness and raising and mobilization in the countries that we work with, including South Africa. We also work specifically with traditional and religious leaders. I think that there was one colleague earlier on who mentioned, because we understand that they're the gatekeepers. So we work with them so that they can then influence, you know, the communities and work with men in their communities. Again, I've mentioned we do a lot of policy and advocacy, and we do media engagement. I don't know if I need to talk about the lessons learned because we have no time, but some of the things that we have learned is men and boys should be engaged as part of the solution, as I've mentioned. And we also recognize that men have a stake in changing the gender inequality, and also can take action to support that change, right? And also being inclusive and responsive to diversity among men, including social and sexual diversity. Can I get a minute to just one of my colleagues, just to share a practical example of what's happening in at least Namibia? I've got plenty, but at least we've got
strictly a minute.
Thank you, sir.
I will time that one.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Absai Kashululu. I work for a women's organization called Women's Action for Development. It's a local NGO in Namibia, and we are doing a lot. But my focus for 1 minute is to talk a little bit about men engaged programs. We have a special program called GBV and Intimate Partner Violence Dialogue with Men, which is, for example, a 5 days workshop. We started these programs around 2016, but then it has spread, you know, from local communities to security cluster. Just in short, and for example, for the past 2 to 3 years, we've been focusing a lot on men in uniform. For example, we have covered the top management of the Namibian Defense Force, male, NAMPOL, Namibian Police Force, the same, Namibia Correctional Service, the same, and the demand is very high. Maybe what I can say, because Josephine actually mentioned a lot, Women's Action for Development is also a member of the Men Engaged Network Namibia, which is also a member to Africa Men Engaged Network, but our secretariat is definitely Zonge Justice, Gender Justice. So in short, maybe I could just say, look, important programs that brings men together to discuss issues that are affecting men. For men to open up and for men to strategize together, for men to discuss, for men to advise each other, for men to be capacitated, especially in family law matters, because a lot of men are going to jail. In Namibia, currently as we speak, the suicide rate stands, is it now 83 or 84% are men who are taking their own lives. So what is happening in South Africa, the same is happening there. But actually a lot, or let me say majority of institutions now in Namibia, we are actually targeting men, including government institutions. And definitely I'm scared my minute is up. I think on the program, during the recap, I will have to step in because I have a lot of information I wanted to share here, especially with the first session in the morning, because we are all here to learn.
That's
so
true.
I'm making my point. Please, tomorrow during recap, I want to speak.
Let's give him a round of applause one more time. And thank you so much, Absai. And thank you so much, Ma'am Josephine, for such a comprehensive presentation. I'm told in the line we've got also Dr. Daniel. However, we just want to say you are welcome, Dr. Daniel Conway. And let's move on to our next presentation. I'm afraid because it's a bishop. Now, you know, when it's a bishop, that means he has escalated from a pastor, apostle. Now, as a bishop now, it's very tough for a bishop to compress to 10 minutes. But I will assist him because it's just next to me. Let's give him a round of applause as about to present his.
Greetings to everyone. As I'm about to finish. You know, in my other life, I am a bishop, so I know you'll go to a funeral and they will tell you, they will call aunties and everyone when it's time for the word, they say, it's way yinja. So yeah, let me also make sure that I run so that it's kati as it yinja. I'm not meaning the MC, but I'm meaning the dog. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to everyone. The issues of gender-based violence, especially when it comes to men, I think they need our serious attention these days. But before I can go there, let me go straight to the issues of that I have looked at, the issues of stats, because we cannot talk about gender-based violence while not knowing how many men are affected by GBV. So I have checked just the stats. I started with women. I checked that 15 years to 49 years, women are subjected to abuse. And then compared to men, 13% of men are subjected to abuse. And those 13% of men, out of 7 men, 1 man is actually subjected to abuse. And those cases are not reported mostly. Out of 4 women, only one woman is affected by GBV, and cases are reported. So that will tell you out of 16 women, 2 women will be a subject of GBV, and then out of 14, only 1 man will be a subject of GBV. So that will tell you that the number is still high. Women are still being abused, and the perpetrators, we cannot shy away, those are men. Also, the issue that you want to look at, I don't know if my mic is audible enough. Okay. Also, the other things that we need to check is the feeling of men. Let me move to the feeling of men. The feeling of men about GBV. I have just checked, visited the states, the feeling of men about GBV. You know, men are even shy to go to attend the event of this nature, because when they go to events, the first thing that they will hear, men are perpetrators. And all those languages that are say men are crash, a man must, and all those things. So yeah, those things are making men not to attend events. As a result, also the issue of men not working, it's a problem. Not only men, but an issue of unemployment is a problem. We were introduced to the system whereby we need to be equal, but we are not trained to be equal. That is the very, very challenge that we are facing. As a man, I will come and come to an event, but when I come, I see people driving some beautiful cars outside, and I will thought, as a man, I'm supposed to be the one that is doing this, because I'm not taught that people are equal. So I'm saying, as much as we are talking about GBV, let us make sure that we are doing trainings of men. Men need to know about GBV. The other things that are said by men, sometimes as a man, you can check on Facebook, WhatsApp, they can say anything about men and nobody will follow that. So as a result, men, they don't want to listen to issues of GBV or any person that is speaking about GBV, because when there are some things that are said about them, nobody is following that. And boom, it's a woman tomorrow. Everybody's like, we are going to court. We are going to support her. Let us support everyone that is actually subjected to GBV. Be it a man, be it a woman, let us support everyone so that the men will feel that they are part of this fight of fighting perpetrators of GBV. Let me move to the next one. Also the issue of AMA rights. I think the men need to be told of their rights. because we are not looking at the issue of the constitution and the issue of our rights. We don't know that we have our rights. So I think also the issue of men, when we are doing trainings of men and boys, we must make sure that we also teach them about their rights so that they will be able to report cases if there are cases of GBV. Mostly also issues of stigma and discrimination against each other need to stop so that we are able to fight GBV in a correct way. Let me go to the next one, which is capacity building. They've said I'm a pastor. I'm familiar with somebody doing it for me. So I think that's where I'm lacking now. Let me go to capacity building. Issues of capacity building. A girl child, it's always trained of how they need to behave, how they need to react when somebody is about to perpetrate them with GBV, but men are not taught of those issues. And we are just letting a boy child to grow up by himself. When you wake up tomorrow, you need to think, what is it that you need to do? There are no skills, there is nothing. As a result, we are still creating another beast that will come back to one day and want to show that he has a power because he's not trained, he's not given any skill as a boy child. So when we are doing AMA skills for young girls, let us make sure that we also provide skills for boys. Because when we are providing skills for boys, we will make sure that we'll be making sure that we decrease the cases of GBV. We cannot decrease the cases of GBV if one part is capacitated and the other part is not capacitated. We'll have a problem. We'll have a part that will always want to show that they have powers. While they don't have powers, the only thing that they are lacking is a skill to fight GBV. Let me move to the next one. You can move to the next one. Let me move to what is it that a man need to do. How best can we work together? What is it that a man need to do and how best we need to work together? So a man need to make sure that they know about GBV, and also a man need to report cases if there are cases of GBV. I'm from the civic society as well. I'm also from the FBO sector. I think those sectors are dominated by men. And in most cases, they are even afraid to talk within the civic society center because when they are raising issues, they are afraid that they will be regarded as people who are also doing gender-based violence or people who are abusing other people. So I think men need to stand up and know their rights and also learn more about GBV. And I also challenge the organization to read, to make sure that they read their NSP. You cannot work with something that you don't know the pillars. So they need to make sure that they understand the pillars, they know the pillars of GBV, and they will be able to work with GBV. And I can tell you, we'll be able to make sure that GBV decreases. We don't want to see cases of GBV always increasing, but we want to see them going down due to us making sure that we learn our guiding document, which is the NSP. As a pastor, I'm always reading my guiding document, which is the Bible. I can tell you many verses in the Bible. Even if I don't know, I will go back and refer. So let us go back and refer to our NSPs so that we are able to talk about GBV, which is something that we are reading about from the book. Can you go to the next slide? I'm about to finish. As I'm about to close.
In 2 minutes.
As I'm about to close, South Africa belongs to all of us. The world belongs to all of us. Africa is ours. Then it is our duty that we fight together this war of GBV. We cannot stand speakers who will come and say we cannot win this war of GBV. Together, we can win this war. Together, we can fight GBV. But what we need is a strength and also people that will dedicate themselves, not about money, but about making sure that the issues of GBV are looked at and we are decreasing GBV. By saying so, in my speech, I just say, God save South Africa, but I just want to change that. God save the whole world. May the good Lord bless you.
Amen. Right. Thank you very much, Bishop. Me sitting here, I feel the anointing. I don't know about you there. I almost fell from this chair. But yeah, thank you so much, Bishop. One said men are logical and women are emotional. Now, with that statement, someone asked me, can you buy me KFC? I was like, because I'm logical as a man, I'm like, yo, I don't have money. And she's like, how? Street price 2 is 30 rand. Because me as a logical man, I'm like, I'm thinking of shares, and buying the whole shop. And because shares, I must buy KFC. I'm thinking of the whole shop. And I'm asking her, I'm thinking of the whole shop. I don't have that million. She said, no, I just wanted streetwise 2. I was like, oh, now I understand. That's how logical men are. But I want to introduce our next speaker, who's Dr. Daniel Conway, who's a professor as well, Department of Politics and International Relations from the University of Westminster, UK online. The Dogotela, you are welcome.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. And greetings from a very grey and rainy London. So I'm afraid at the end of the day, I'm going to talk about some academic research about masculinities and the possibilities for change, as well as some of the current challenges and regressive developments in what I'll call global masculinity politics. I'm going to argue in particular that homophobia plays an important role in maintaining and reinforcing a hierarchy of masculinities where violence is embedded. And therefore, tackling homophobia is an important goal to enable the change of masculinities, and also that the backlash politics against women's rights and LGBT rights is a global cultural and political movement that finds local applications across Africa and is enacted in youth culture on the web and on apps, and is thus therefore an important place to conduct work to counter this backlash politics and present progressive and different ways of being a man. Now, as a researcher, and I think as a person as well, I've always been interested in how social and political change happens, and the reasons for why some people become perpetrators of abuse and oppression, and many people can be complicit in this abuse, even if by only turning a blind eye, whereas others from the same social context will step outside that and act differently. And it was really for these reasons that I researched white South Africans who were actively opposed to apartheid, and specifically white men who refused to serve in the South African Defence Force for political reasons. Now, this was a very gendered process, and while the men whom I interviewed were all white, they were actually very diverse and different from each other in terms of their life histories, class, religions, and sexuality. But there were some common factors that pointed to differences in their socialization in white society and in their attitudes towards gender. These differences often happened at school, such as experiences of playing rugby and making connections with military service, or in different backgrounds to the norm of white South Africa. And this outsider status gave them insights to the violence and oppression of apartheid. Now, the men and the women of the anti-apartheid group of the End Conscription campaign campaigned about the need to change violent white South African masculinities, and also argued that military service was not making men out of boys, but was actually warping and damaging South African white men, just as much as the army was damaging and terrorizing the country and region. And this evidence Archbishop Desmond Tutu's later claim that perpetrators are victims too. So I begin here to say that we can look at recent history to see social movements that have aimed to change men from violent and oppressive to non-violent and democratic. And although we know this clearly is not a total or final achievement in South Africa, groups like the ECC and men who refused to serve in the army did puncture that natural presentation of white masculinities as violent and racist and open the possibilities for change. Now, historical and anthropological studies have shown that there are multiple masculinities shaped by local culture, social organization, and economic contexts. These studies show that masculinities are socially constructed and emphasize gender identities, including masculinity, as a performance. Now, this concept that's come to dominate academic masculinity studies is hegemonic masculinity. Based on the Gramscian concept of hegemony, the Australian academic Raewyn Connell coined this term in the 90s to define the form of masculinity that's culturally dominant in any given setting. Now, typical traits which won't surprise anyone, I think, include power, aggression, control, repression of emotions, risk-taking, and overt heterosexuality. A set of behavior which specific individuals or groups of boys and young men may conform to or may reject. And while there are multiple coexisting forms of masculinity, hegemonic masculinity embodies the most honored way of being a man. It requires all other men to position themselves in relation to it, and it legitimates the global subordination of women to men. So this means that the majority of men in any given context won't be the perfect hegemonic man, but they'll want to be, and they'll admire men they consider to encompass these hegemonic traits. But one of Connell's key contentions is that there is a hierarchy of masculinities, and this hierarchy is policed and maintained by homophobia. The fear that men can be called out as being too feminine and or of being gay. For this reason, gay masculinities are subordinate, and women, by implication of their femininity, are disempowered and subordinate to men. And I'll return to this, but like I said at the beginning, I think this is why tackling homophobia is one of the key means to open up the possibilities for masculinities to change away from violent, controlling hegemonic types, because without homophobia, men no longer fear embracing different gender norms and ways of being. And for change to occur, boys and men need opportunities to critically examine models of masculinity, to reflect and to explore new ways of doing manhood in their daily interactions with partners, families, and friends. Now, we know, as many of the speakers have said, and all the work you do, we know that to work with adolescents in schools and in popular culture are critical moments and locations for changing the models of masculinity. And change may happen for a number of reasons: exposure to different models of masculinity, realization of the negative impacts of gender inequality on women and girls, a desire for more meaningful and equitable relationships, and commitment to an ethical principle, or recognition of practical gain. Now, there's been lots of talk of masculinity and of men being in crisis, and that the solutions to this crisis require traditional male role models, such as father figures, to be more prominent in boys' lives. Now, we know, as the chair of the panel said, boys do face specific problems, that they're less likely to do well at school than girls in almost every global context. They're more likely to die by violence from war, accidents, or suicide than women. Although, incidentally, if you factor in disease, more women die as a result of conflict than men. Men are less likely to seek healthcare for serious conditions than women. And data also shows that adolescent boys are more vulnerable to peer pressure to become sexually active early and to engage in risky sexual behaviors. But I think we should be careful not to consider this as evidence of a new crisis of masculinity, or that somehow men have lost their way and need to reclaim their traditional masculinity through, for example, father figures. There's actually really very little evidence for this. Connell is clear that hegemonic masculinity is and has always been crisis-prone, and that violence is woven through its fabric. Therefore, in order for masculinities to change, we need, if anything, to reject traditional forms of male authority and allow men to consider gender identity in ways that reach beyond these traditional masculinities and the rejection of femininity. So fostering support for gender equity and tolerance for LGBT communities are the surest ways for boys and men to claim authentic and inclusive identities, ones that are not likely to be violent, self-destructive, and risk-taking. So a recent academic review of projects that work with young men in the Global South found that the majority of projects created positive change in masculinities, but the most significant changes happened in projects that enabled men not just to explore their attitudes and behaviors towards women, but also their attitudes and behaviors towards men who were different to them, particularly gay men. And one participant in the South African Men Care Plus project stated, We have learned to respect and accept guys who have relationships with guys. I used to ignore them and we used to call them names. Now I respect their choices. However, as we also all know, efforts for change may also and have encountered opposition, resistance, and backlash. For example,
If you can conclude in 2 minutes, Doc.
I will hurry through, thank you. For example, research that suggested that boys and men face particular difficulty in adopting more gender equitable masculinities in highly gender segregated societies. We know that there's been a strong backlash against gender and LGBT rights across the world. This backlash politics was discernible from the late 1980s onwards as women's rights advanced in many countries and so-called men's rights groups emerged. These groups argued that feminism had gone too far, turned the tables, and emasculated man. And these discourses are fostered in web chat rooms, YouTube, social media movements, and people like Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, Elon Musk, and find their champions in political leaders like Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, and Viktor Orban. This manosphere, if you call it, is engendered in distinctive ways in Africa, where from Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria to North Africa, media, social media, web chat rooms, pop stars, and other figures present feminism, women's empowerment, and LGBT rights as a Western threat. Now, more research needs to be done on these new and dangerous trends. And I would argue that it's on social media and web platforms and in popular culture that work needs to be done to challenge and present different ways of being a man and change the discourse on masculinity and femininity. So to conclude, questioning the common sense, natural presentation of masculinity in singular terms is the first step in exposing its constructed, multifaceted and relational nature. It's the first moment where positive change can happen. These changes can and have happened throughout history and across contexts, but unless we challenge the repudiation of femininity, the fear of being gay, and the associated contempt for women, meaningful change will not last and will be highly vulnerable to sexist and homophobic backlash politics. It's an urgent and vital task, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Conway. Guys, you are a good audience. Please clap your hands for yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucky, and thank you to our previous panelists. It really was an engaging session, and yeah, we've got a lot of food for thought, and I think for tomorrow we should at least all have something that we want to take, from today, and just think of what will we do with that, because this is about lessons sharing, and I'm actually more proud of our audience that's questioning and challenging us and giving us work to do and talking about a third symposium. So also that in making the conscious decisions of who do we invite, because I think the big thing is that we also know who we know and we don't know who we don't know, and the more we interact and engage with each other, the more ideas we give. So I do hope that we keep that momentum going for tomorrow, push this idea of collaboration. I would like to say that if we leave here tomorrow, that 4 people or 4 organizations would come and say, hey, we've got a partnership going. Like Alice said, we should not look at resources only as finance. It's actually also the people working together and pushing ideas and things like that. So yes, I know Prof. Hendricks always says, and she's not here, but she says what? Alone I can go far, but together we can go. Alone I can go quick, but together we can go far. And I think that's what we wanted to do. If we don't want to come back in 5 years and say our symposium is still talking about GBV prevention. We're talking about a different type of conversation within 5 years, because we shifted that needle. We accelerated the pace. So thank you, everyone. I saw that they actually packed down, and I think it could be because the caterers also, we're mindful of it, that people live far and everything else. So I think our caterers packed up as just part of working hours and working conditions. So apologies for that. But I would suggest if we have time and you can mingle a bit, please do. But otherwise, the bus is ready for people who want to go. I know some have meetings and different appointments. But then tomorrow we're meeting again here 9 o'clock, and we're going to have another good day. So thank you. And thank you, Ambassador, for giving us the extra time. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.